I'd like to call to order the Saugatuck City Council meeting for Thursday, February 29th. If the clerk could please call the roll.
Pledge of Allegiance.
Oh, I already screwed things up. If you could please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. If the clerk could now please call the roll.
Anderson. Here. Baldwin.
Here.
Dean.
Here.
Gardner.
Here.
Muncy.
Here.
Stanton.
Here.
White.
Here.
You have a quorum.
All right, thank you. Next up is mayor's comments, and this has been quite a week. So thank you all for being here. First of all, I do want to thank our city clerk, Jamie, and our deputy clerk, Sarah, for all of their extra time and effort into our recent election. With the added early voting and then election day on Tuesday, we know you worked long hours and had added responsibilities. So we thank you so much. And we also want to thank the election volunteers. They had to go through quite a bit of training with the early elections. And also worked very long days. So the group of volunteers, we just want to thank them. So also, I want to thank Ryan Cummins. It's been a big week for Ryan. Not only is he our planning and zoning administrator dealing with a very difficult issue with short-term rentals, he has stepped up into the interim city manager position. So we thank you for taking on the extra responsibilities. Okay, quick housekeeping. Everyone is welcome to speak tonight, and we hope everyone has a chance to do so. But we have heard from all of you many times. We've also had a great deal of correspondence. So if you could, to keep things moving tonight, if somebody has said something, very similar to something you want to say, if we could keep that moving along. And then also, if you haven't ever spoken, please, let's give those folks a chance to speak tonight. We do have a 10 o'clock cutoff. If we do reach the 10 o'clock timeframe, we would have to make a motion to extend the meeting. But I think we can get through this tonight and be efficient tonight. So I appreciate your patience. It's an important issue. I also want to say that I've written and rewritten what I wanted to say tonight, and I agonized and lost sleep over the issues before us. I just want to set the record straight on a couple of issues that I saw floating around, whether in people's comments or on social media. But the proposed moratorium was never about an elimination of short-term rentals in the city of Saugatuck. That was never our intention or anyone's intention. We have 275 short-term rental certificates in the city of Saugatuck. The proposed moratorium or temporary pause was for new applications only and only in our residential districts, which we can debate, and we have. We've debated this topic for a while, but please just debate the facts. I appreciate that. And because I don't want to drone on, I'm not one for flowery speeches. I just want to say, I want everyone to please just be respectful of each other's viewpoints. We all come from different places on this issue. Have empathy. Please just have empathy, and let's work together toward some common ground. With that being said, city manager's comments. Ryan Cummins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I want to echo your comments and as it relates to our city clerk and our deputy clerk and all those election workers and all the work that they did during 9 days of early voting and on election day with a lot of new challenges. It wasn't easy. They've spent a lot of long days, many days working in a row. And so I'm really grateful for all the work that they've done. They did extremely well and did it in a collaborative nature and working with the township and building those good relationships. So I want to echo that. Thanks to them. And I appreciate your thanks to me and my current roles, but really want to, kind of pass that thanks along to you. Have an excellent city staff team. Everybody has stepped up and helped in a number of ways and been more than willing to step in and help answer questions and help carry the workload. Our legal team, our planning consultant, our engineers, the sheriff's department, fire department, and many others, they've all done the same. Really just very responsive, very helpful and getting questions answered and supporting us here at the city of Saugatuck. So you have great staff, very capable team, and I really appreciate the trust that everyone's placed in us. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. On to any agenda changes. Anyone have any agenda changes? Okay. Any guest speakers tonight, Jamie? Okay. Next up is public comment on agenda items only. I just want to remind everyone, please look through the agenda and speak on agenda items only. And when you do speak, first and last name and where you reside.
Hi, everybody. Holly Leo, 419 St. Joseph Street. A moratorium is the biggest and most expensive stick you have in City Hall. And this is the fourth time you would be grabbing for that stick in the last few years. This one has some problems. There is definitely an issue of transparency and communication to the community here. The word moratorium came up suddenly. There's no mention of that word in the last Planning Commission packet, and it appears only once in last week's council workshop packet. And I believe the idea of a moratorium has been considered more than people realize, and that's a problem for everybody. So I'm standing here asking you to resist the urge to swing the surprise stick and instead put your energy into an equitable and database solutions to short-term rentals in the city, because you have the power. It's just a matter of you showing us how you intend to handle this. Are we all in a years-long stick fight battle royale? Or can you show us something less volatile, less expensive, and something that might bring all of us along together? Thank you.
Doug Rodwald, 413 Hoffman Street. This has been definitely a hard conversation, and I look around. I'm so glad I'm on this side and not that side. So best of luck. I went back and looked at all the work that the committee did. And what was really interesting to me was the analysis of the home value and the increases and some of the other neighborhoods or communities that compared to. The ones that stood out to me were South Haven and New Buffalo that had very similar home value increases as Saugatuck, if not identical. And both of those communities have paused, or not paused, but both of them have STR regulations. New Buffalo specifically paused in May 18th of 2020 was when the city manager or mayor there signed it. And these are the 5 points that they noted for doing it. There was a risk of decreasing the number of long-term residents, decreasing enrollment in local schools, decreasing the availability of long-term housing stock, thereby driving up prices and making long-term residency less affordable, creating significant number of vacant homes in the winter months, and increasing level of noise, traffic, and on-street parking. All of these are very similar items that I personally remember reading about within the study. New Buffalo then went and actually implemented a cap, not a ban, a cap within their residential areas. And guess what? This was all prior to looking at the prices of the homes that continued to pace right at Saugatuck. There's a lot of passion around this, I get this, but we all talk about studies and data. There's data, it's in the report. It's just about correlation. So all the best on the decision, but the way we see it, or the way I see it, is that it's proven STRs, rules around them, it's not new, it's everywhere. New York banned them. So yeah, good luck and thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Doug.
Anyone else?
Yeah, Tad DeGraff, Lighthouse Realty. I'm at 403 Water Street on Main, commercial property down here. I'm currently involved with 3 transactions that are trying to change ownership, 3 of which have, or 2, excuse me, which have the short-term rental through 2006. And I just hope that you adhere to the existing properties that have the permits to transfer with property ownership. And then I understand that you're gonna go to possibly a 1 year or 3 year re-up on the rental agreements, but I would hope that you wouldn't take away the property owner's rights in the state to do what they want with their property. And I would hope that you would adhere to the current properties that are in the rental program to let them move forward.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. Nico Leo,
Gonna be
419
on
St.
deck.
Joseph Street. I stand here again in opposition to any form of a moratorium on short-term rentals. I just don't understand why this issue is being revisited again at the onset of our tourist season. As a member and then the chair of the Board of Review for many years, I feel it's important to point out that full-time homeowners who claim a 100% principal residential exemption on their property taxes do not contribute financially to the operational costs of our schools. It's the 18 mills collected from second homes and businesses in town that primarily fund our school system. I'd also like to address several letters included in tonight's packet that caught my attention. It's important to note that these letters are from residents who currently hold short-term rental certificates, but now advocate for the revoking of that option from their neighbors. Is this truly indicative of being a good neighbor? The majority of the complaints in these letters predominantly concern enforcement issues. I urge the council to reject any type of moratorium and instead implement and enforce the recommendations of the task force. Only after a financial impact study has been completed should we consider any restrictions on any additional short-term rentals if warranted. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Lisa.
Hello, Lisa Mize, Executive Director of the Saugatuck Douglas Convention and Visitors Bureau. First of all, thank you to the Short-Term Rental Task Force, to the Planning Commission for all of the work that they've done, and their many hours of service around this very complicated issue. Thank you to City Council for taking on such an important topic to everyone. The CVB's primary purpose is to promote tourism for our beautiful area and to advocate for sensible, sustainable development on behalf of our lodging members and related businesses that cater to tourists and locals alike. As an important part of our tourism ecosystem, short-term rentals greatly impact the local economy by attracting more visitors, which in turn helps create jobs, trigger sales for restaurants and retailers, and increase tax revenues. When tourists visit Saugatuck, they currently have, and rightfully expect, a variety of lodging options. However, short-term rentals are by far the lodging option that many tourists choose. Vacation rentals make up approximately 45% of all the assessment revenue that we use to promote the area. As such, the property management companies in our area that pass the CVB assessment from the guest to the CVB play a big part in the tourist decision to vacation here. The homes that they manage are key to the guest's Saugatuck experience and satisfaction. Property management companies like Mill Pond, Bella Vita, Relax Rentals, Jaqua, and Vacasa, to name a few, make sure that their homes follow the rules and regulations set forth. They are attentive local landlords who take care of guests and their complaints. They're here to professionally handle any rental situations before they become an issue. While we agree that there needs to be better and more consistent regulations applied to all short-term rentals, as you decide on the various issues before you tonight, please keep in mind the vital impact that tourism has on Saugatuck and their surrounding area's economy. Let's be sure that we're communicating that to our potential tourists. Let's be sure they know that Saugatuck welcomes them with open arms. Let's make sure we keep our businesses in business by reinforcing our hard-earned reputation as a world-class destination, one that we need to responsibly protect and nurture. Thank you so much.
Lisa.
Last one, Joe Clark, 419 Francis Street. I am a member of the Planning Commission, also sat in on the Short-Term Rental Task Force. Mayor Stanton, council members, thank you for letting me address you tonight. and thank you for your service to the city. I'll try and be very brief. I'm standing before you today because over the course of several public meetings, there have been comments made regarding analysis of the survey data, specifically the will of the residents and whether or not they support putting caps in place. So, I kind of scratched my head because I remember from looking at the data that was rolled up by McKenna that it did show that the residents were in support. But nevertheless, I went back and decided to look at the raw data myself and just go through it real quick. So I thought I'd share a little bit with you tonight. And just by way of background, I was a part owner of a data analytics company, so I'm kind of a data junkie, not a statistician. Anyway, without getting too deep after reviewing the data, focus on answering a question. Does the survey show that residents support caps? I've always found if you ask the question, then look at the data, you can get a better answer. The facts are, it shows just under 60% of the residents responded in support of some type of caps, with about 35% opposing, the remaining 6.5% undecided or neutral. So if you break that down a little bit, it shows, a higher propensity in the zones that are higher density and with more short-term rental penetration, kind of the numbers start ticking up. As for what level of caps the residents tend to support, the picture's not so clear, mainly because of the confusing way the questions were, staged in the survey. But when the data is aggregated and you kind of look at the response rate across all the residents who support caps, it shows that they tend to support the 20% range as opposed to the 30 or the greater than 30% rate. So these are just the facts. Call it like I see it in the data. I know you have some tough deliberations to go through tonight, and I'm hoping this helps as you go through all that. So thank you and have a good night.
Thank you, Joe.
Thanks, Joe.
Hi, Chris.
Hi, Chris Peterson, 742 Pleasant
If
Street.
you want to put the microphone down right there at your mouth, you can just bring it all
That
the way. down.
better?
There you go.
Okay, perfect. Ernie and I moved here about 16 years ago because we fell in love with Saugatuck and we didn't want to change a thing. Now here we are with something will change the whole dynamic of the town if the moratorium goes through. And it looks like the goal of this is to limit tourism and maybe get more families to buy because the prices go down. So how do you bring home values down? Well, you restrict income producing properties. Any person who comes here this summer and falls in love and wants to look at a home will be told there's a moratorium for 6 months and possibility of being forever. Boom. That closes the door on the sale. And we have anecdotal stories that that's already happened. And those of us that do have current STR certificates, we are not grandfathered. You are not revoking our certificate till it expires, but to grandfather us would mean then when we reapply, we would get in. That's not anywhere in the ordinance. So if that happens, is there a denial process? Is there an appeal process if we get denied? How will the certificates be handled? Right now, people are calling us to book for next year. I can't tell them anything except there's a moratorium. We might not have our certificate. They just move right on down the road. I see you nodding, then put it in the ordinance that we are grandfathered in for every time we recertify. The STR committee recommended 4 items that need to be addressed. And those 4 proposed ordinances are here today. And I think they would be a great compromise, or at least a starting point to determine whether this is going to go forward or not. And not only the homeowners, but the restaurants and the businesses and everybody else has put hundreds of thousands of dollars in this community to make it a premier tourist town. And I don't think we want to stop that change. So I'm not sure why we keep coming back to a moratorium when the committee has addressed the problem and put forward the ordinance. What other reason is there than to limit tourists? Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Anyone else in the room? Please come on up.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kelly Roach. I live at 413 Hoffman Street in Saugatuck. I listened to about an hour 30 into the last workshop, and there's just a few things that I'd like to say based on that. First of all, I was concerned that we did not hear from one family that's raising kids here, not one. I happen to be raising a family here, 2 boys up on the hill. I'm not surprised because while we have a school in the residential neighborhood, just a stone's throw from here, that ranks firmly in the top 10% in the state, there are very few families that can afford to walk there. I know of families that would have loved to buy and be able to have their kid walk to school, and they can't afford that right now. If you go to other communities with that asset, you'll find full-time families. And that is a driver of real estate value along with other things, right? We are acting like the only solution to support Saugatuck's economy is short-term rentals. And we know that a lot of people come in here for the day. And so I think putting all our energy towards the singular thing and not towards the true health of our economy by investing in urban planning and taking away the barriers to come in here, like parking and being aggravated by that there's no parking, is something that we really need to consider, not just short-term rentals. I've served on PTOs at both schools. I serve on Saugatuck Recreation's Advisory Board. I serve on the City Council's Parks and Public Works Committee, and I served on our steering committee for the 5-year Parks Plan. And it's not because I'm a saint. It's because I care very much about this community, and we have too few residents here to run our government and give time to our schools, and that's a problem. I don't understand why investor voices are more important than those of ours that are doing the work of this community, and that's what this feels like. I went home and read the short-term rental task force report again. And on page 63, it states full-time residents were in favor of establishing a cap on short-term rentals. However, the method of which how to do this and the actual cap limit was inconclusive. As stated, confusing questions, right? So I don't understand why the task force was not addressing this finding already. And that's why our planning commission kicked it to council so that we can talk about this further, take a pause and decide. I want to thank the council. I want to thank you for your hard work. I know this is a very tough issue. I know there's been unprecedented vitriol surrounding this, and that's really tough, especially in a small town. When I thought about if I wanted to speak tonight, I walked outside my house. I looked around, realized I have no direct neighbors left. I have a little kitty corner out of my driveway where I have a full-time resident. Other than that, it's completely surrounded by STRs. It was not like that when I moved here 6 years ago. It was not like that when I bought the property 15 years ago. And I realized I don't have any next door neighbors. So I just asked the council, we're in support of a moratorium to pause, consider what to do. And I ask you to consider the fabric and the vibrancy and the quality of life for the people that live here, not just the loudest voices. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly.
Anyone else in the audience?
Hi, Christine O'Gara. I work in the city, live in the township, 3521 65th Street. Again, I want to echo everyone else who thanks everyone for their hard work. I know how exhausting this is, and I really appreciate, Lauren, how you started the meeting. Yeah, people have gotten ugly, and it's a very controversial issue, as we all know. One thing as a Realtor I'd like to bring to everyone's attention, not just the council's, that fair housing is a federal law. And when we talk about we need families, a familial status is protected under fair housing. So if we can caution people to just leave that out, it kind of grates at my nerves because I believe in the Realtors Code of Ethics and I believe in our laws. So that's just on a side note. I've looked at all the ordinances. I really like what you've done. I just have a few notes that I would like to add. In Ordinance A on page 87, Part J1, you limit accessory buildings to people with primary year if they're only a year-round resident. And I'm wondering if it's someone who doesn't do short-term rentals, maybe they live in Florida half the year, here half the year, why couldn't they rent their accessory dwelling? I think the goal is to limit STRs, but if I just think that's something worth looking at. Ordinance B, the intent on page 96, I see a lot throughout the ordinances, all the health, safety, welfare, the wellness of our community. And I've read a lot of interesting data on the fire departments and fire statistics and how many homes, fires and deaths from homes without smoke detectors. Our short-term rentals in this communities all have fire smoke detectors thanks to our fire department and that level of certification. And I think when we refer to the safety of our community, I wonder if we should consider having everyone install smoke detectors. As a Realtor, I've been in houses without working smoke detectors. And I see that you guys really care about the wellness of our community, and that's just something I think we should consider. Page 99, B16, there's that's a section that talks about when you're, you have to announce when you have changes to your certificate. I think you might want to add that they have to tell you if they sell their home, and then you know that certificate's no longer being used. I also think if someone decides to stop a short-term rental, they should communicate that to whoever's tracking this new list that's going to be formed. On page 195.56B, that one, it kind of just read to me like we only care about the community. And it's, again, it's like about the wellness, but we don't care about any visitors. So just so if people read this, they can read that they have visitors. I'm going to jump ahead to the moratorium because I know I'm almost out of time. My only issue with that is the 6-month or until the city has enacted a valid amendment to the city code. There needs to be an end date. There's enough controversy on this issue. It can't go on for years and years.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Anyone else in the room?
And
So if you can state your first and last name and where you.
McGuire, 541 Mason Street. I know you've had an appraiser up here before. I'm not sure if that was Dino, Terry, somebody else. But I've been doing full-time real estate appraising for 34 years. You can hire any studies you want. I've done my own, and I believe the first appraiser that was here before said something about a 25% roughly expected percentage drop in value. I would say that's a conservative figure. And if everybody here is fine with losing 25 to 35% on everything they own, hey, I am 100% against this. I do not own any rental properties, but I have 6 out of 10 rentals on my block, and I have not had one problem. I pretty much know who either runs them or who owns them, and we keep in touch. Everything's fine. I do understand for families, it's a little bit different. I do not have any children. But I want to mention this zoning map, which basically, if you're not in the commercial district, you are in R1, with the exception of Lake Street, which is R2. I was just through a home on Lake Street. That's a 5-bedroom, 3-bath. You're going to tell me it's okay for them to do anything they want. They are not part of this moratorium, but yet my neighbor with a cute little 2-bedroom can't rent that, but these people can have 10, 12 cars going all day long in one driveway. So I don't mean to stick the R2 people, but that's not fair, plain and simple. I mean, it should be all or nothing. If you're a single family, or the board should be equal for everybody. I can tell you that these properties that are short-term rentals are typically in better condition than a long-term tenant or some of our owner-occupied homes. They're much more maintained. Trying to get families in here, I looked for years because I need a certain floor plan. I need a certain number of rooms. I think we all know the homes in Saugatuck are a hodgepodge. We've got some new construction. No young family's going to ever be able to afford that home and that floor plan, no matter what happens. So for people to think that they're going to get into a family of 5 with a cute little 2-bedroom cottage, and even with prices going down, it's still going to cost them $350,000. That's not going to happen. So like I said, you guys can do all the studies you want on value, but I'm going to say 25 to 35% on up. So that's not fair to me. I've been a 7-year part-time, 7-year full-time resident, and that's not fair. Take away my investment or theirs.
All right, Julie, thank you. Anyone else?
Hi there. My name's Dan Panazzo, and I live at 727 Butler Street. I think we need more short-term rentals. I've lived on Butler Street for the last 16 years. I've raised 3 kids at 727. Small through high school, they're all gone now. And I am completely surrounded by short-term rentals, all 4 sides, have been the whole time I've lived in this house. And we have never had a problem where I had to report an incident, trash or parking or noise. Just the opposite. We actually have made friends with a lot of people that come from Detroit, Chicago, and our kids have made friends and our dog has made friends, and we actually look forward to the rental season. It's never been a problem. There is not enough places to park during the day, on the weekends. The short-term rentals allow people to come to this town and walk to the businesses. And if you haven't noticed, we're barely making it now. We have empty businesses. They're empty longer, they're turning faster, and they're not filling as fast. So that's what I've noticed. And you can look around, the Toulouse, still vacant. People put money, Fish Camp, a year, gone. So not everybody can be fills. And these businesses need to make it in 3 months. We need more business if we're going to be a resort town. Now, if we want to be like Fenville, that's fine, but that's what will happen. We won't stay the same. We'll either continue to grow by investing in our resort town model and deal with the challenges, the trash, the noise, the whatever, or we'll shrink. There is no staying status quo. It's not going to happen. So we have to provide more opportunity for commerce to be this magical little Saugatuck, or it'll go away.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your work.
Thank you. Anyone else, please feel free to come up. Really, no takers? Okay. All right, let's go online then. Yeah, we'll start from the top left. Steve Manns, if you can unmute yourself and state your name and where you live.
Hey, good afternoon. My name is Steve Manns. I'm 568 Wyrick Drive in Saugatuck. My comments relate to the short-term rental agenda items on the agenda today. And as many of you know, I also chair the Saugatuck Planning Commission. We've heard many short-term rental related comments over the last year, and especially the last week, that are somewhat mistruths, misstatements, and even accusations. While they're unfortunate, I'm not going to address those here. I want to spend my limited time talking to you about not really feelings, which we heard some about in last week's workshop, but more about comfort. The Planning Commission, along with what I believe all the residents of the city of Saugatuck, take comfort in knowing that we live in a beautiful community that is highly relies on tourism. I also believe we all take comfort in understanding how important the cottage and short-term rental businesses and the opportunities they present are to continuing the success of our merchants as well as our tourism business. But I must ask, are we comfortable as a community with having 25 to 30% of our housing stock involved in short-term rentals? And in some neighborhoods, it's even higher than that percentage. Are we also comfortable in knowing, and it's been expressed here several times, that our housing market is now priced in such a way that unless we allow a homeowner to rent their home and generate extra income, they cannot get a mortgage or even afford to buy that house? Are we comfortable with our homes in residential neighborhoods being priced like they're businesses? Lastly, I ask, are we comfortable with allowing even more residential community homes to become these quasi-businesses? And if so, where will it stop? Will it stop at 35%, 40%, 50%? The short-term rental task force was not comfortable in making a recommendation to impose limits or caps. However, they did ask for counsel and the Planning Commission to continue to investigate this topic. The majority of the planning commissioners have listened to the citizens and believe this topic needs further review. And then in a 6-to-1 majority vote, the planning commissioners believed that having a 6-month moratorium while they were reviewing this topic would be prudent. All knowing that this would not change any of the existing operations or the opportunities for tourism that the 275 current short-term rental certificates provide. So I asked council, and I ask each of you to evaluate your comfort with each of these items. Please assess your comfort in passing today's ordinances that have been recommended by the Planning Commission, as well as your comfort of listening to your constituents and who have voted you into the chairs that you have as to whether we should have an increase in the number of outstanding short-term rentals, and ask that you consider passing the moratorium just so that we can limit the number of where we are today while we're evaluating what is best for the community moving forward.
All
Thank
right,
you.
Steve, your time is up. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Steve.
Next up, Mark Lachey, if you can unmute yourself.
I think I just did.
Yep, you're good.
Great. Madam Mayor.
State your
thank you
name
for
and
your
where you
comments.
live.
I'm sorry?
State your name and where you live.
Oh, of course. Mark Lachey, 345 Grand Street on the corner of Main on the hill. I thank you for your comments. I find the tone of this meeting somewhat calmer, less hysterical than the workshop. And I appreciate that greatly. I found a lot of derisive looks and comments of people in response to other comments, and that really disturbed me. I'll say what I wrote my note last. I'll say it first. I've been coming here about 40 years. My partner and I have owned a house here for 11. This is the most divisive issue I've seen in my time in Saugatuck, and I find that incredibly unfortunate for what, just putting that out there. I do want to mention also about something that hasn't been mentioned. Kelly mentioned it for the first time. I believe it wasn't mentioned at all during the workshop, is the issue of day trippers. There's a considerable amount of comments that but for short-term rentals, but for unfettered number of short-term rentals, this town will drive and blow away like Singapore did. And I think that is not mentioning the day trippers, the considerable number of day trippers and the rise in the number of day trippers. They used to come park by my house, for example. We're about half a block from the high school, right on a route straight downtown on holiday weekends. And then it became every weekend. And I will tell you, in the summer, there are people parked on both sides of Main Street and on Grand Street virtually every day during the summer. So do not discount the impact of day trippers on the restaurants and the retail. I am also on the Planning Commission, and I want to state first and foremost, I am certainly not opposed to some number of short-term rentals in our community. I know people, I've met people who would not be able to enjoy our town if they were not able to, for part of the year, some of the weeks of the year, rent out their house in short-term rentals, and to give everybody an opportunity, or as many people as possible, an opportunity to enjoy our community is certainly part of what I'm thinking about, and I'm sure what our Planning Commission is thinking about as well. So a moratorium is simply a pause. It does not take away anybody's property rights. That is simply incorrect. It is a pause, and it is being written has been written to not remove anything other than the status quo. And so I would ask the City Council to pass the moratorium, to give the Planning Commission and the City Council an opportunity to actually look this further and decide if a moratorium, if it caps are something we should do, or maybe it's not right for this town. Thank you very much.
All right, Mark, thank you. Up next is Joe. If you can unmute yourself, state your first and last name and where you live.
Joe Coelho, 764 Mason Street. I know you guys can't answer these questions, but I just kind of want to ensure that these topics are considered. How will you manage first question is, what is the benefit of moving from 3 years to 1 on the recertifications? And then how will you manage the annual certification renewals in regards to staffing and increased costs, since now you'll have to have so many more done in a shorter time frame? And also, if the vote is for the moratorium, what will happen during that time? Like, what are the goals and the purpose, and has that been defined beyond just talking about it more? Do we have very specific goals in that? That's all. Thank you.
All right, Joe, thanks so much. Up next, Brad, if you could unmute yourself, state your first and last name, where you live.
Can you hear me? Sorry.
Yep, we can hear you.
Brad Va, 260 Brook Street, and I live 3158th Street in Hamilton. Definitely spoken here a couple of times before. I had two things I kind of wanted to touch on this evening about the short-term rental moratorium. One, there's been a lot of commentary about how it is a divisive conversation, and I can totally understand and see where that comes from. However, the reason why it is a divisive conversation should also be addressed. As other people have alluded to, this has come up year after year. This has come up with very little notice. This has come up with very open-ended and unclear expectations. Currently, as a short-term rental owner in the city, I don't know what the state of my permit will be. I don't know what the state of expectations will be. I don't know if I will be grandfathered in at the end of this moratorium and when a cap conversation starts. So this council and this planning commission have partially contributed to this divisiveness, to this contentious conversation by pushing something forward very quickly without a clear indication and without a clear expectation, a clear documentation of what we should all expect during this process and after this process. And barring having any kind of that expectation, barring any kind of that information, people are going to jump to conclusions. People are going to take gossip and hearsay and whatnot and let it turn into control. And the only way to move forward is to actually put this forward as a plan with an outcome, with a deadline, with anticipated questions, FAQs, community involvement, whatever it may be, so that people are aligned and are on the same page and do understand what is being voted upon, what is being asked of them. Secondly, there's a little bit of a weirdness to me here, and I just want to call this out. I know it can't necessarily be answered, but it's a little bit bothersome in my understanding of how the Planning Commission should be working, and that the Planning Commission should be studying something for the city, for this council, and providing suggestions and recommendations for this council to then opine on. But the simple fact of the matter that we have multiple members, including the head of the Planning Commission, speaking so vociferously and so emotionally about something that they should be suggesting, leads a lot of questions open as to who is actually pushing for these kind of suggestions, these kind of changes. Is it actually the citizens? Is it actually the constituents? Or is it a small group of people on the Planning Commission that want to force forward something that they are clearly emotionally and intensely passionate about? Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Up next, Greg, if you could unmute yourself, say your first and last name and where you live.
Yes, Greg Auer. I live at 548 Hoffman Street. And Madam Mayor, you started off the meeting with sticking to the facts. And I apologize that my document that I would like to submit for public documentation was only a couple of minutes before the meeting started tonight. I'm lucky enough to have access of one of only 4 companies in America that have access to Experian data. And what I want to talk about and change the conversation around is tourism. This is not a short-term rental conversation. This is not a, hotel conversation. I really want to keep it focused on you have the power to greatly affect tourism dollars being spent in Saugatuck. Any reduction will reduce the tax revenue being spent. It'll affect all these businesses that we love in our town. And I have shown you in a small data model in 7 pages that not only the community within Saugatuck, people who live within 49453, but also in a 10-mile radius, do not have the income to support any kind of reduction in tourism. Not short-term rentals, just people coming to visit. I'd be more than happy to meet with the council, review the data, go through the data with them. And this is all from a data and analytics company who does this for a living, that is solely only looking at tourism dollars being spent in Saugatuck. Because that's where the conversation really needs to be, is are you willing to reduce the amount of people that can come to this awesome town that we bought in 2020 and we love very, very much? Are you willing to reduce the amount of money being spent in this town? Because that's the real conversation right now. It's no longer short-term rental. Do you want to do this to the small businesses that we all know and love? And as well, you reduce that tax base. How are you going to pay your teachers? How are you going to fix your roads? When that tax revenue goes away, of money being spent in your zip code, you will lose it. And my report shows the data all the way down to detailed level of household makeups in town. Thank you for your time.
All right, Greg, thank you so much. Up next, Anne, if you could unmute yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ann Broker. I am at 508 Park Street in Saugatuck, and I serve as vice chair for the city's planning commission. And I just wanted to speak out in support of the 6-month short-term rental moratorium, or pause, as Mark aptly called it, that was recommended to the city council by the planning commission. The short-term rental task force did not reach a consensus on the issue of short-term rental caps, and I believe that the planning commission and city council owe it to the citizens of Saugatuck to consider whether some form of short-term rental caps are in the best interest of the city. I agree with what other people have said, they may or may not be, but we need to take a look at them. And I want to quote along those lines, I just want to quote from the Short-Term Rental Task Force final report, which is available to everyone on the city's website. And one of the statements in the short-term rental cap section is that the task force acknowledged that further review and analysis of instituting a cap on the number of rentals may be required. However, for the purpose of the short-term rental task force, a consensus from the members was given that no definitive direction on caps was achieved. The task force acknowledged the amount of work and level of data analysis that was conducted since May 2023, and that continued discussions pertaining to caps should continue. Adopting the moratorium is a reasonable and sensible policy measure. It would allow the Planning Commission and City Council time to thoughtfully consider the issue of short-term rental caps as recommended by the Short-Term Rental Task Force based on a static situation rather than a moving target. So thank you for your consideration of that piece of that ordinance, as well as the ordinances related to short-term rentals before you this evening.
Thanks. All right, Anne, thank you. Up next, Kurt, you could unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, hi, everyone. My name is Kurt Gehring. My wife and I are non-resident owners of 648 Pleasant Street. We live in New Jersey now, but we bought our home, fell in love with Saugatuck about 15 years ago, and we love our time that we've had in Saugatuck, raising our children there during the summer, during the holidays, and we hope to retire in Saugatuck one day, not too far in the future. I would say, though, that if I was coming into Saugatuck today, I would not purchase a home on my street, Pleasant Street, given the unmanaged rental activity. So I would say, take the time to realize what that says about potential real estate values, if indeed the rental market, the short-term rental market, sometime cools down, which it will. It won't last forever. I would say, first off, please take the time to understand all the options, and most importantly, enforce the proposed new rental rules as an interim solution to start to get this problem managed. Thank you.
All right, Kurt, thank you. Dick, if you want to unmute yourself.
Hi, Dick Waskin, 6576 Heron Ridge Road, Saugatuck. As I mentioned at the workshop meeting that I did attend almost every meeting of the short-term rental task force, what came up that was certainly a consensus was that as they came up with these suggestions that you're going to be reviewing tonight, that these were good steps to try to solve the problems that some people were having with short-term rentals. And I believe many of these are really good suggestions, and I hope you enact them tonight. They did not say, let's go further and have caps. What they did say is, and I heard it time and time again, let's give these new rules time to see what happens, to see if it solves many of the issues, solves many of the problems that people are having. There was no rush to say that there should be a moratorium. And I guess I'm puzzled when I hear the Planning Commission say, well, we need a moratorium to do our work. Can they not do their work in the absence of a moratorium? Can they not discuss the issues? Cannot the council themselves discuss the issues without a moratorium? We've already talked about the consequences a moratorium can have. And I think it's very important that you realize that before you jump into this. And I certainly have heard economic studies is very important that be done prior to any moratorium put in place to just see what effects these decisions are going to have. And lastly, I just want to comment, there was a council member last week that said, if we don't do anything here at council, the citizens are going to do it themselves. You are doing something. You actually are doing a cap in a sense. If you pass which I think is a very reasonable suggestion, that only 2 people per bedroom, per floor, 2 people per floor of a house with no greater than 12 people, that's a cap. You actually can respond to your citizens saying, we heard you. We are taking a step in this direction to do this, to reduce the number of people. So you're already reducing the number of people who can come to town and stay here. But I think when you put a moratorium in place, you're actually putting an agenda in place. You're telling Planning Commission, we want you to come up with caps. We want you to make these decisions. And that's why I think a moratorium in itself is a decision that's going to put us down that road that I don't think many, many people want us to go. Thank you.
All right, Dick, thanks so much. Ethan, if you can unmute yourself.
Hello, yeah, Ethan Barty, 584 Lake Street, Quaint Cottages. I've spoke several times. Again, just want to reiterate a little bit of what Dick said there too. I think, from day one, we talked about rules, regulations, a lot in which we've had in place, maybe not enforced as much as needed. I think a review of those is definitely, a great idea. I think more enforcement is a great idea, holding people accountable. I think that's a great place to start, grab some data, and go from there. I think the COVID boom, it went out of control. Prices went through the roof. Investors aren't coming here to buy houses and rent them and make money like they were. The numbers don't work. It's going to take care of itself. There's going to be houses that do naturally go down a smaller percent, and maybe families move in because the numbers don't work for a rental income business. So I would suggest that you keep doing with the work you have done. Get the rules, get some enforcement in place, collect data, and I'm all for change. We're all for change. As things work, keep them. As things don't work, let's continue to change as a community and make things better. As far as the word moratorium, that to me is a death sentence for the town as far as property values go. We talked about it. They talked about a moratorium in the very beginning. Didn't do it. They said, hey, let's get to work. Let's get it done. Let's, push these, these few things through and try it and see how things go. I think that's what we should do. A moratorium it's already cost us a sale of a house. It's negatively impacting values. We just heard the appraiser, 25, 35%. That's no joke. it's reality. So it's already happened. The moratorium has already decreased the value of everybody's home by 35% as soon as it goes into effect. And that is just a fact. Whether you like it or not, that is a fact. We had a deal go through, a 2-bedroom home on a slab. A family can't live there. It's a cottage. They're not gonna be able to sell it now. They're not gonna be able to rent it. They're gonna be sitting on it for as long as this moratorium is gonna be sitting there, which there's not even really a time limit. So moratorium is a bad idea. Thank you.
All right, Ethan, thank you. Up next, Mark, if you can unmute yourself.
Hello, Mark Klungel, 747 Water Street. I was on the last planning where all of this was kind of rushed through. Watched the planning committee and that went on till after 10 at night. All of these ordinances along with this moratorium was rushed through at the last minute, and even the planning commission didn't have time to talk about it, let alone the citizens give input to it at the planning commission. The ordinances themselves were quickly pushed through, and there was no really review with the citizens or the audience on any of this. One of the things that I look at, because I have a lot of questions on the ordinances, is where is the good neighbor policy? It's touted as being a great part of it. How can we pass an ordinance with a good neighbor policy when it hasn't ever been written or nobody's seen it? To me, this is still incomplete. It was rushed through. I really think most of this should be pushed back to planning and give citizens a chance to give input at that level to all these ordinances. And we can finish the job, because I don't know what everybody is asked. It thinks the good neighbor policy is a great idea. Who has seen it? It hasn't been written yet, to the best of my knowledge. Yet we're passing an ordinance where it's claimed to be important and they all have to follow it and it's got to be posted. I don't know how you can pass an ordinance where it's not available to be reviewed. So anyway, I really think most of this should go back to planning for further detail and to work out and get the audience, or basically the public, involved at that level. Thank you.
Mark, thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Anyone else with a hand raised? I want to give people a chance. Jamie, do you see anyone else with a hand raised? Okay, excellent. All right, public comment then on that is closed, and we'll move on to the consent agenda. Ryan Cummins, if you could.
Oh, sorry. Hello. Sorry.
Oh, is there's.
Yes, I'm on my phone, so I wasn't able to. There is no little arrow. There's no little place I can speak. I mean,
all right,
anyhow, I'm on my phone.
I'll take a
It's like-
quick moment to allow this. If you could state your first and last name and where you live, you have 3 minutes.
Sure. My name is Brian Reed. I live at 568 Main Street. I owned in Baymont, so I've been there since 2017. And I think Ethan's right. Like, the numbers don't make sense for rentals, but we plan on retiring there, and we go up there all summer long with our children. I'm from Chicago. I fell in love with it in 2006. Finally purchased a place in Bayview in like 2017 because I had a swimming pool. My kids are getting older now, and they're bringing their friends up. So now we have a house there, but we spend a lot of our summer up there, our breaks. And I'm a teacher in Chicago. I think that putting a moratorium would be like really, really bad as far as, and as Ethan was saying, the numbers don't make sense for a rental. So I think you will actually see that the pricing will go down a bit. No one's there to be buying these houses at the prices they're at and can actually run it. It basically helps pay a little bit of the bills, but for the most part, I'm paying my mortgage there. And we also pay like 50% more in taxes to help support the schools and everything like that. And I think the big thing I want to just tell is there's 1,000 kind of, little towns along the lake, and they're kind of dumpy. And even Fenville isn't as great as it is. I think what makes Saugatuck amazing is that you do allow these short-term rentals where people who can afford all these wonderful restaurants and shops and everything like that. I mean, you should just cruise around. There's a whole lot of poor, like not places where you'd want to raise your children or visit and stuff like that all all over Michigan. So I think it's important.
Give them a couple seconds.
Restaurants
there
and
we go.
everything you have in shops in Saugatuck. But I'm just saying, you wouldn't have this many amazing shops and talk for that out, you know, during the summer and things like that. I think I'd just be really, really careful because Fenville was a good example. And there's even like a lot of other towns that are even worse shape than that, because Fenville gets some, you know, business from Saugatuck too. But I would just be really, really careful about eliminating or putting a moratorium on. It's kind of crazy because it would, and I'm also a realtor here in Chicago, it would kill the property value there. And someone else made a good point. A lot of these homes don't have enough bedrooms to support a family. So I think it's kind of disingenuous to believe that, you know, a 2-bedroom, 1-bath or a 3-bedroom, 1-bath is really going to support this family that's going to go to the schools there and stuff like that. So I think it's just important to remember how much revenue you guys are pulling in, tax revenue. And if you truly have a moratorium, I wouldn't be surprised if it's going to secretly out and they lose the hotel tax and all the other rental coming in. They might just rent it to their quote unquote friends. Their friends just stay there, and you wouldn't get all the revenue that you guys are drawing. Anyhow, that was all. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you. Okay, I'm just double checking. Anyone else online? If you raise or, you know, if you can't figure out how to raise your hand electronically, if you want to wave around.
Yeah,
Anybody?
hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead. I see. Who are you seeing? Sheila?
Sheila Denman? Yeah,
Okay, go ahead.
so we purchased 860 Simonson a year ago. Prior
Oh,
to
Sheila,
that
you
had
just need to introduce yourself, first and last name and where you live, please.
Okay, Sheila Denman, 860 Simonson.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so we used to have a home up on the top of the hill on Elizabeth Street and just recently purchased Simonson. For us, I'm really concerned about what would happen to our property value if the moratorium went in place. I think that Saugatuck is a tourist town and that's what it's built on and will continue to thrive if tourism continues to be a focus of the town. Taking the moratorium in place would change the tourism considerably and would certainly have a significant impact on the restaurants and businesses in town.
All right, Sheila, thank you. Top left corner, BSOWA. Unmute yourself, state your first and last name, where you live.
Severin Nowicki, 841 Holland Street. Just 2 points I would like to make tonight is that in my mind, there is a concern of the amount of application for short-term rental, but I think that part of that increase is that the moratorium was proposed and the way how it was proposed a year ago. So just in case for myself, I applied for the license for the house I live in full time, just in case I would like to be able to rent. So I think just the idea of that stimulated the actual number of people applying. Also, what it connects to my first point is that the number of licenses issued to people that currently own the license is not equivalent to actually how many people are renting their homes for short-term rentals. There is a possibility that the number is bigger than the actual number of homes being used for that purpose. So those 2 points I would like to make. Thank you.
Amy, do you need his first and last name and where he lives?
Severin Nowicki, 841 Holland Street.
Okay. All right, Seb, thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.
All right, now on to top left corner. If you can unmute yourself, state your first and last name, where you live.
Julie Soa, 444 Main Street, Saugatuck, Michigan. Hello, everybody. I want to point out that something that hasn't been brought up. My family's had our cottage on the hill for 97 years. My grandfather bought it in 1927. My children are 4th generation kids that are part of the continuation of our family cottage. I think you have to remember there's a whole group of people here that are part of the family cottage generational, multi-generational people that are very invested in Saugatuck. My sister worked at the Root Beer Barrel. She was a waitress. My brother worked at the Hollyhock House. We spent our summers there. I taught tennis for 4 years. And I worked at the ice cream store, and I worked at Funk's newsstand. Our family is very, very much invested in Saugatuck. But taxes are killing the multi-generational family. When you inherit a property, you have to take on the burden of the rising property taxes that are occurring in Saugatuck. You have to be able to offset those expenses. Most people don't have other people to help them. My siblings are deceased, most of them, and they are not able to help me take on the burden of owning this home. I would like to keep the cottage, but it's getting very expensive to pay the taxes. I live in California, and my taxes are cheaper in California than they are in Michigan, and my home is worth double what it is in Saugatuck. So I want to hold on to the cottage. I love the neighborhood, the community, but I want you to know it is a burden. With the rising taxes, we have to be able to support and pay those tax bills. We are people, we're not just short-term renters, we're people that very much like Saugatuck and want to stay here. And I really would like to keep the cottage, but if it gets to the point where I can't rent it at least a little bit, I'm going to have to sell.
All right, thank you for your comments. Anyone else? I'll wait for Jamie to go through not seeing anyone.
Yeah, just one additional comment.
Oh,
This is
I'm
again.
sorry. I'm sorry. You can't do an additional comment, but at the end of the meeting, you are allowed to have your additional comment if you would like to wait till the end. Thanks, Sheila.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. Anyone else? Okay. I'm closing it for real this time. Okay. We are now on to item number 9, the consent agenda. And RC, if you want to go over why there's so many items within the consent agenda. We did go over a lot of this at the workshop. And some of these are, they're all in one for our consent agenda to approve or not.
Certainly, Madam Mayor. So typically a consent agenda is kind of a agenda of items that, there's general agreement amongst the council. They were all at your workshop. There weren't any, concerns raised to where you might want to have some maybe, more debate on a particular item. And so they're kind of all lumped together as kind of unanimous consent type items. And so happy to certainly answer any particular questions you might have on a particular item. Typically, like at the beginning of a meeting, if you see something on the consent that maybe you do have concern about, or maybe you're like, I'm not sure that I am a yes on that. Good time to, raise it. You can always move any item from consent to new business and still have further discussion and debate on it at that time too.
Okay. So before we have any questions or concerns, if I could have a motion for the consent agenda.
Mayor,
Yes.
motion to approve the consent agenda as submitted.
I'll second.
Okay. Motion by Dean, second by Baldwin. Any discussion?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, thank you. 2 items on the consent agenda. Items C and D, I again want to thank the owners of Grow LLC. They made a presentation about their proposal at the Historic District Commission meeting in February, earlier this month. And a comment was made at the meeting about not putting picnic tables on the launch ramp, and they responded to that by removing that from the proposal. So I just want to thank them for their consideration of that proposal. 2 is I also want to thank Barry Johnson for his presumed reappointment to the Cal Lake Board. Thank you, Barry, for your service. Talk about hard work. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Any other comments or discussion? Okay. This is a roll call.
Anderson,
Yes.
Baldwin.
Yes.
Dean,
Yes.
Gardner,
Yes.
Muncy,
Yes.
Stanton,
Yes.
White.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right. Thank you all. On to item number 10, staff reports, boards, commissions, and committees, starting with the city manager's report. Ryan?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My report's in your packet. I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Anyone have any questions? Okay. We will move on to the treasurer's report. Is Peter online?
Yes.
Okay, Peter, if you can unmute yourself, or if anybody has any questions for Peter at this point. Does anyone have any questions for Peter?
keep paying the bills.
Okay. Moving on then to the planning and zoning report.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A lot of the planning zoning discussion will occur later on your agenda. I apologize, I didn't have my normal, more detailed reports. I just simply ran out of time for this meeting packet with all the other preparations, but happy to answer any questions.
All right. Any questions for Ryan? All right, we'll move on to DPW. I know Cody is here. Does anyone have any questions for Cody? Or anything you wanted to add, Cody? Okay. Russ, did you have some
Yeah.
questions? Cody, if you wouldn't mind coming up if
I-
Russ has
I-
some questions.
Yeah, actually, it's, I discussed this with the superintendent of DPW earlier today. If you'll notice in the RFP for Oval Beach, it had a proposal due of March 4th, has been updated to April.
Been updated.
April.
I know he updated the date. I'm not
I
exactly
have,
sure
I have that
yet.
information. Let me just see here really quick.
So folks don't think they have to be sure.
No, I was going back and forth with him. The way that he's proposed it right now is that hopefully we can issue the RFP by March 6th, get the proposals due by April 5th, make the award by the 22nd, and then a contract signed by May 1st.
Thank you.
Okay.
My understanding.
Thanks, Cody.
All right, Cody, thank you.
They were marked in red. I think you guys know.
Yeah, they were marked in red for that purpose. Yeah, just so it wouldn't drag us, but yeah.
Okay. All right. Moving on to police or sheriff's department. Is anyone online? Does anybody have any questions? Okay, nothing to report. The engineers report, anything?
No, he's not online.
Okay. Moving on to boards, commissions, and committees. The Fire District Administration Board. Is Dan in the room? Okay. Moving on to Interurban Board. Gregory?
Everything is going great. You know, we have such a wonderful gal, Phyllis Height, who will be retiring, and the team, we have a team that's on the move to hire a new director, which I'm also applying for, as you know. We just finished our year-end 2023 audit, and we always like to present a copy to the city. If you wouldn't mind passing that down to the clerk, I'd appreciate that.
Great.
And everything's going great.
Any questions for Gregory?
No, thank you, Gregory.
Okay. Cal Lake Sewer and Water Authority, Barry is in the house.
Freshly reappointed.
Freshly reappointed, Barry Johnson.
Guess I just made it. I'm not on the board and for another 3 hours and 50 minutes, but if I'm reappointed, I guess I am. So you got a big meeting tonight. I'm not gonna bore you with all these little details. I will email you all the manager's report so you can see what we talked about the last meeting, which is just on Monday. But you know, the water still goes when you fill up your teapot, and when you flush the toilet, it goes to the right place, so everything's good. We've done some well work. We've got a capacity report for the sewer capacity, and Douglas is the largest user of the sewer plant. Saugatuck is second, even in the summertime. So, and I guess I'm gonna let you go, but we do have hydrant flushing on April 15th, which is when you got to run the water and make sure it runs clear. Because when you do the hydrants, there's 600 of them. It kind of shakes things up, so.
Barry, thank you for your continued commitment to Cal Lake and as the chair. I do have some questions for you, but I know this is a long meeting, so I'll just email them to you and then I'll pass it along to everyone else. But thank you so much.
I'll watch for it. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks,
All
Barry.
right.
Thanks, Barry.
Cal Lake Harbor Authority, we next meet April 9th. They have committed to 4 meetings for the year, and I'll update you on any new things with that coming forward. Zoning Board of Appeals, any report from ZBA? Thank you. Okay, Jim, thanks. Historic District,
We meet next Thursday, March 7th at 6 PM.
okay. Planning Commission?
Yeah, we've been focused on short-term rental. So we'll meet again later this month.
The
And,
21st.
you know, hopefully, I mean, regardless, I think of the moratorium, the plan is to begin deliberating. Our planning consultant, Dave Jurasik, has made some recommendations. Should we, pursue or explore the potential for caps, looking at how we might define neighborhoods, looking at how we might define caps? Do you do that percentage? Do you do it, spatially? So that will be, I think, good data to inform the decisions. I do want to say quickly, I don't think the Planning Commission has rushed any of its deliberations, just to make a comment about that. The recommendations around short-term rentals came to us in October, and we've had a lot of discussion, so it was not a rushed deliberation process. Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks, Tommy.
All right. PPW, Helen.
Yeah, unfortunately, due to lack of quorum, we had to cancel our meeting for today, but we rescheduled it for March 15th, which is a Friday,
Yeah.
10 a.m. Come and join us.
All right. Tri-Community Non-Motorized Trail Study Committee. Scott.
Thank you, Mayor. Ryan's getting briefed by members of the Blue Star Trail. Some things that the council will probably see down the road is perhaps adding some funding to add a traffic light study to the work that's going to be done around the Blue Star. Sorry, not around the Blue Star, around the Saugatuck sign that's going to need to be adjusted, the location of that sign slightly. It's not a big adjustment, but we might as well future-proof it to plan for hopefully a stoplight at that intersection in the future. So you'll see more about that. And there's also some discussion, still preliminary discussion about what type of dividers might be employed between the bike path and the road. People are starting to look at something that's called a wave divider. You can see those online. They're more of a kind of a wave water type looking divider rather than the plastic posts that you see over in Douglas. So that's being discussed as well. That would be an increase in project cost. So this will all come before the council at some point. I just want to flag it. Ryan's getting up to speed and, it's a moving target, some of these little pieces, but we're still moving forward.
Okay.
Yep.
Any questions at this point? All right. All right, then we will move on. Request for payment, we have none. On to item number 12, approval of accounts payable. In this piece of paper, I do not have the accounts payable amount, but I believe it's right in your packet if somebody would like to make a motion.
Madam Mayor, I'll make a motion to approve the accounts payable as presented in the amount of $1,058,022.60.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion at this point?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I would just, I didn't run the percentages, but for those of you that think we're spending millions of dollars of the city's money, most of this is taxes that are flowing through to the different authorities.
I always appreciate when you do that, just to flag that for folks, because it does look scary. It does look scary. It is a pass-through. So at this point, this is a roll call vote.
Anderson,
Yes.
Baldwin.
Yes.
Dean,
Yes.
Gardner,
Yes.
Hensy.
Yes.
Stanton.
Yes.
White.
Yes.
All right. Thank you. Introduction of ordinances, none. Unfinished business, none. We are on to new business. Item 15A, zoning ordinance amendment for the STRs and ADUs. Ryan, if you would like to set that up.
All right, thank you, Madam Mayor. Maybe I'll just do a very brief introduction. If there's a motion that's put on the table, then I'm happy to provide any further details, or, as many details as you would like, and certainly answer any questions. But kind of the short summary is, after many months of work with the short-term rental task force, and then the Planning Commission discussing zoning updates for several months and conducting a public hearing, they've recommended some changes to your zoning ordinance that right now all of your short-term rental regulations are within your zoning ordinance. And so they've recommended a separate police powers related ordinance that would license short-term rentals and regulate short-term rental activities throughout the entire city. And that's going to be discussed as your next agenda item. So this zoning ordinance amendment essentially takes a lot of the short-term rental certificate kind of process out of the zoning ordinance. The locations of short-term rentals in certain zoning districts is still located within the zoning ordinance and isn't changed, with the exception of actually allowing a little bit more flexibility for certain commercial districts and locations of short-term rentals in certain types of dwellings. There's some updates to the accessory dwelling unit standards, really to kind of clarify the way that we've been, carrying out the ordinance, to make some language a little bit more clear for folks as they're reading it. And then some cleanup language with the flood hazard area definition, and then removing rental occupancy certificate from the list of definitions.
Mayor,
Yes,
I'd like to make a motion.
go ahead.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt ordinance number 240229-A to amend the City of Saugatuck zoning ordinance to update provisions governing short-term rentals and to clarify specific provisions pertaining to accessory dwelling units and the rental of the same.
Second.
Okay. Motion by Muncy, second by Baldwin. Discussion.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, as an owner of an accessory dwelling unit and having gone through this process of getting approval for special land use from the Planning Commission, pretty familiar with it. The updates that the Planning Commission have made to this, I'm in support of. It's very interesting, though, if, for those of you that attend, I think most of us were at the Planning Commission meeting, there's a lot of back and forth about this. And I think it's always a good reminder to tell folks that this is, even though we're passing an ordinance, we can always make adjustments as problems occur or improvements can be made. It's set in stone to the extent that we know what we know today, but you know, that's why we rely on our zoning administrator and the Planning Commission to identify where changes may be made and adjustments can be made to this going forward. So
Yeah.
for those that are concerned that there's no changes, there could very well be adjustments to this.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay. At this point, this is,
All roll calls on your ordinances.
that
being
sounds
read
great.
now.
Jamie, if you could call the roll.
Anderson,
Yes.
Baldwin,
Yes.
Bean,
Yes.
Gardner,
Yes.
Muncy,
Yes.
Stanton.
Yes.
White.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, moving on to item 15B, Police Powers Licensing Ordinance. Ryan, if you could take this as well.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So this is now that you've just approved your zoning amendments, essentially removing short-term rental certificates from the zoning ordinance, this is a separate police powers related or regulatory licensing ordinance that would regulate activities of short-term rentals throughout the entire city. A lot of the recommendations that are before you in this licensing ordinance are really directly from the short-term rental task force themselves, with some refinements from your and additional input from your planning commissioners, as you were asking them to ultimately give you some feedback on this. And so it's a very high level, summary. Essentially, instead of a 3-year certificate process that was in zoning before, now there will be an annual license and fire inspection that's required. Occupancy would be set at 2 per bedroom plus a possible additional, 2 per finished floor, but not to exceed 12. There's visitor maximum occupancies that are set. There's requirements to advertise a license number to make sure that folks that are advertising actually have an actual license and then went through that process and the inspections. There's notes in this ordinance that you're still required to comply with zoning. So the zoning is still indicating where you can have short-term rentals in the city. We're still regulating signage. It's going to require some posting of various rules and reminders and kind of good neighbor policies to remind folks that there are neighbors that are here still while they're vacationing. There's a requirement to have increased amount of trash cans to deal with trash issues. There's some clarification on or a prohibition essentially on the owner not allowing short-term rental occupants to use fireworks. There's a requirement to have rental insurance. There's a requirement that there will be a short-term rental registry for the licensees that shows who the owner is, who the agents are, the maximum occupancy that's set. A very important provision essentially is that the current short-term rental certificates that are in place through the zoning, the licensing ordinance essentially recognizes those and states that an existing short-term rental certificate remains in place and isn't subject to the new licensing ordinance until that certificate actually expires. So if your certificate's good for 2 more years, you're going to still operate under that certificate regulatory scheme until it expires, and then you'll be subject to the new licensing regulations that are here before you. There's a duty in here to actually address issues. So right now there's a requirement to have a rental agent, but not really a mechanism to make sure that they actually respond to issues. And so there's a requirement here that they respond to actual issues that they become aware of within a 2-hour period. There's a suspension revocation process that's outlined. There's actually a mechanism to actually hold anybody that makes a fraudulent complaint accountable. So folks aren't just making frivolous complaints, they could also be held accountable. And then there's a provision that essentially is very similar to the certificates, and that licenses cannot be transferred to new owners. That's currently the case with the short-term rental certificates. That provision essentially is carried over into the licenses requirements, and this kind of outlines that process a little bit more in detail. So.
Okay, at this point, could I take a motion?
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Motion to adopt ordinance number 240229-B to provide for the public peace and health and for the safety of persons and property in the city of Saugatuck by the licensing and regulation of short-term rentals, to provide procedures for the suspension and revocation of short-term rental licenses, and to provide penalties for violations of short-term rental regulations.
Do I-
Second.
And we have a second?
Yeah.
Yep. Motion by Baldwin, second by Anderson. Discussion. Any questions? Okay, yes. If you don't mind, I don't, one thing I, wanted to address is, I know there's going to be, some fee structures that we're going to have to look at. Because there's some expense with a lot of this, more fire department, having to do this more often, some varying things that need to take place. What will it look like as far as coming up with some numbers, as far as changing some fees and that sort of thing?
Right. So an important note here is that, if you pass this tonight, it doesn't immediately go into effect. It still has to be published in the newspaper, and it's also tied to the effective date of the zoning ordinance amendment. So my plan is at your workshop meeting next week to kind of bring you an enforcement plan and some proposed fees to update your fee schedule. So when this actually is noticed and goes into effect, you would have some updated fees. So I plan on bringing some details on that to your meeting next week. I mean, essentially, instead of having a fee that you pay, this year for 3 years, you're going to have a yearly fee. And really, I've heard you as a council loud and clear that you want, the cost of regulating short-term rentals, all that cost to kind of and enforcement costs and all that goes with it to be a cost that's passed on to the owners of the short-term rental units. So more to come next week.
And so like, just for, clarification and just for people in the audience, the reason why we didn't have a fee structure in place, because you have to pass something first before you can spend all the time on a fee structure. Because if it didn't pass, why spend all the time on a fee structure? That's kind of how that worked.
Exactly. So we're kind of working an enforcement plan around what you want to ultimately enforce. And so I have some ideas. I've gathered a lot of information and with the thought that this might be what you pass, but at the same time, I don't know for sure that you're going to pass everything in here. And I don't want to, we're looking at some third-party support for certain items here that may not be necessary if you don't pass certain provisions. So I wanted to have that first.
Any,
Yeah, thanks.
Go ahead,
Madam
Russ.
Mayor. I had a chance to talk with the zoning administrator today about that exact topic, and yeah, I don't want perfect to get in the way of good here, because I'm always like, I want this thing to be exactly as it should be, as it launches, everything's in place. That's not the situation here. We're taking a big step as a community to move to better manage and control the short-term rental properties and to address some of the issues. You saw some of the pictures that were in the packet this evening, right? That's something that we need to get better at. And I think this is a good step forward to getting there. It's going to be, in my mind, this is probably a 1 to 3 year project to get this right. Changes will have to be made, adjustments will have to be made. We'll have to come back to this. We'll have to, so I view this as being a good step forward, but it's not the end of the process. And to the point is, I think it's important to make sure that the public understands that the responsibility and the cost of this are going to be borne by the short-term rental permit holders. And we'll see more information next week. I have some personal opinions about how I think that should be done, which I shared with Ryan today. We'll see more of that next week. But I just want to say that, I can pick apart some things in here. Like, I don't know how in the world you could control short-term rentals from shooting off fireworks. That's going to be a tough one to manage. But having said that, I don't want perfect to get in the way of good here. So I'm in support of this. I do appreciate the comment that was made by one of the people this evening, is that the Good Neighbor Guide, I'd love to see a draft of that. I really would like to see what that encompasses. And I'll just say, from my personal experience, I'm surrounded by short-term rentals as well. The biggest issues I've had is people parking across the sidewalk, so pedestrians can't get through. You go over and you knock on the door and you just say, hey, can you move your car off the sidewalk? Noise, occasionally, go over and just say, hey, keep it down. People always respond very, very, very appropriately. And you know, as was said by one of the commenters too, is, I love having new people come into town. Hi, welcome to Saugatuck. My wife always jokes like, hey, I have a dog. Do you have a dog? You know, so I'm a very casual kind of person and I appreciate seeing new people. That's my perspective. And so short-term rentals, in my perspective, is that there's some things that have to be managed better, which we're going to be doing. But ultimately, you know, short-term rentals are part of the environment culture here. So.
Anyone else?
Thank you. You know, I like this document. I like most of what's on it, but I just can't be comfortable with all of it, unfortunately. There was that I mentioned before, the occupancy of 12. When we only have 10 houses in the city that sleep 12 or more, that seems a little pointed to me. You know, and I don't think that that's necessary. I understand the safety. But then I also understand that I think our short-term rentals, like we heard earlier, are probably safer than that are being inspected, are probably safer than our full-time homes. That how do we know? We have no regulation if they have fire departments or fire exit signs. I know a lot of rentals have maps, you know, around the house. I don't know how many residents have those maps in their houses. So, you know, I feel that I just can't in good faith vote on this because of that. And then also, I would just like to see how much this is going to cost us first before we vote on it. I understand there's a lot to do after. I just hate to pass on something not really knowing exactly what these fees are going to be, how much, you know, what exactly would the penalty be for someone that has a fraudulent complaint? Is that a $500 fee? Is it a $1,200 fee? You know, I'd like to see those things. And then also, I'd like to, you know, I know we've talked to the fire department, but I'd like to hear their opinion about doing the yearly versus the 3-year. And what economic impact that's going to make on them, and are they staffed for it? So those are some questions that I'd like to have answered before I could pass this.
I can just answer the last one just because I was on the short-term rental task force. Chief Janik did address that issue and they said they were in favor of the yearly.
Right, I
And,
know that.
you know, they would make adjustments, you know, with the fee structure and that sort of thing as far as being able to have enough staff to do that. But they were in favor of it.
Okay.
They also said that going to an annual inspection is actually a quicker because, you know, they've just been there a year before. So they thought it would be, you know, say, I have no idea how long it takes to do an inspection, but say it takes 2 hours now, maybe it would only take an hour and a half on an annual basis. And I've totally made up those numbers, but there are efficiencies of doing it annually.
Yeah, but I
Yeah.
think it's again, it's that exceed of 12. I just like I said, with only 10 houses that comfortably sleep, you've got houses that might have, you know, 6 or 7 bedrooms that are safe, do have lots of windows and doors to jump out of. So yeah. just
Thank
wanted
you,
to-
Gregory. Thank you. Anyone else want to make a comment?
Yeah, I share a concern over the occupancy limits as they're stated. Obviously, there's a need for something like that. I think it seems pretty reasonable at first blush. I got thinking about my house. My house technically would qualify for 12 people in it, and I don't think that's a safe number of people in my house. It is very small. So like almost going that way on that direction. And then there are some houses that clearly can sleep more than 12 people. So yeah, I'm curious about that a little bit, and maybe we'll have to right size that later. But I share concerns over that number. I don't know if anybody has similar thoughts.
Anyone else?
Well,
Yeah,
this
if
is.
I
No,
could-
Mayor,
Sheila, you're not
Sheila,
allowed.
It's not how it
Sorry.
works. Point of order.
It's okay, Sheila. We're just
Order.
not allowed. Go ahead. Go ahead, Scott.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, I think Councilman Gardner made a good point in the previous ordinance, you know, if we need to make adjustments down the road, we can do that. I trust the recommendation from the task force that we got last year. I trust the deliberations of the planning commission who approved this 6-1. So I'm comfortable.
Okay. Anything else? Any other comments?
Madam
Go
Mayor,
ahead. Okay.
I would echo those comments that we can make adjustments down the road if something seems onerous or whatever. There's nothing about this that prohibits us from going somewhere. And I think that Councilmember Gardner made a good comment. Let's not make perfect the enemy of good. I mean, we're gonna get this, and then we'll look at the fee structures, because now we hit the cart before the horse, right? We got to get this passed, and then we can talk about the fee structures. So these things are going to evolve as we deliberate and pass these things. But I think that everything on here, for the most part, makes good sense to me. I know that it's been exhaustively reviewed by Short-Term Rental Committee, the Planning Commission. I've accepted the recommendation. I'm absolutely for passing this ordinance tonight.
And Holly, did you have anything more?
Just said some of what I wanted to say.
Okay. All right. So at this, do you want to add some more, Russ?
Yeah, I just want to echo Council Member Muncie's comments about the cost. I shared some of that concern with the zoning administrator today too. I just think we'll have to see what the information is at this point. I don't think the city is going to be in the business of trying to, exorbitantly set fees. It's just going to be cover what we need to do the right thing here.
Sure.
And we don't quite know what that is. I share your uncomfortability, but I'm willing to move ahead with it with the expectation that we'll get it right.
Okay, go ahead, Logan.
Yeah, I'm excited about this as a whole. This was something that was clearly defined by the community as something that we needed. So, the planning commission for pulling this together. So especially quickly, it's very thorough. Not that we need to have a whole discussion about it, but I can see this coming down the pike, and I want to get it out there. The requirement for 2 trash cans for 6 or more. I don't know that there's very many rentals that can't get 6 people at them. I'll be interested about that, but like, I could definitely see us hearing that there are too many trash cans in there.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
just preparing for that.
Okay.
It's because there's going to be a lot more trash cans in town.
Well, Mayor, if I may,
Yeah.
to echo the councilman's point, I mean, the other elephant in the room we need to deal with down the road is recycling. I mean, Jamie gets many renters that come in and they want to recycle all the time. They come in, they want to recycle. So we're going to need to address that at some point as well.
Yeah, we look forward to tackling that. Our contract does come up in October, but
And that really came up in the task force and on the planning commission. So, but knowing that we couldn't do that immediately.
yep. Anything else at this point? Because
Overall,
Oh, yeah,
just
yeah.
like, I'm glad that we have this to start off and kind of fine tune and iterate on. This is kind of a minimum viable product for this, and looking forward to it.
Thank you, Logan.
And,
Gregory.
it looks like this is gonna go through probably without my vote, and that's okay. But what I'm concerned about is, have we had a conversation with our police enforcement and their role? And because it looks like, they're gonna be needed a little bit more. So, are they comfortable with this?
Yeah, so.
Have we had that conversation?
So they've been aware of the recommendations that are coming forth.
I'd like to hear from them.
They're going to be a component of some of this enforcement, certainly, but not all of this, and the enforcement of all of this by
Right.
any means. So I think I'll be kind of delineating in the proposed enforcement of this at your next meeting, of which items I anticipate them kind of having the lead on or focus on, and others that will be using some other, or propose to use some other tools on.
Yeah, and I will say, as part of the task force, we did have a presentation from the sheriff's department,
Right.
just about varying things, especially noise ordinances and how they deal with that, and different things that go on within the city. And now that, we're getting down to a little bit more nitty gritty, then they can address those issues, and I think that will be great. But they did address those things during the task force.
So one more thing.
Yeah.
So if we have just a few houses here that do sleep 12 or more, and they're already booking for the summer. So if this goes through as it is, they would not be able to have 12 people this summer?
So-
Go ahead, Ryan. I know you have an answer to that.
Yeah, so that is an important distinction, I think, and Councilmember Gardner kind of touched on this earlier, in that it's just kind of almost a 1 to 3 year process where we're going to have 2 regulatory schemes for a while, because if you have an existing certificate today that allows you to have a higher occupancy, you'll be able to continue under that certificate with that higher occupancy until it expires. So if it's good for another year or 2 years, you'll be able to continue with that, and you won't be subject to these regulations until you actually apply for and are issued that new license.
Yep.
And, okay, and, I'm sorry, if, in that situation, if there's that house that we talked about that's in the process of a sale right now that does sleep more than 12. And so, you know, is anything grandfathered with that? That was a rental before. And it's on the sale block. If this sells after this goes through, it would be a new certificate, right?
And they would be subject to this licensing and they would have to abide by the maximum of 12, correct?
All right, thank
Yep.
you.
Okay. Anything else at this time? All right, then this is a roll call vote. Jamie?
Yes.
Baldwin.
Yes.
Dean,
Yes.
Gardner,
Yes.
Muncy,
No.
Stanton.
Yes.
White.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, on to item 15C, the amendment to the noise ordinance.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. So as part of that task force process and really from a staff perspective as well and legal perspective, we had some noise ordinance updates were recommended. And so before you this evening is amendments to your existing noise ordinance that really kind of updates it to make sure that it meets recent case law and makes it more defensible and as far as enforcement. Really, the time limitations that are within it are really left unchanged with the exception of construction noises and lawn maintenance equipment. Those hours were changed to 8 a.m. to 8 p.m.
Okay, is there a motion? I'm sorry, it is on page
11, page 111.
111.
Mayor,
Yes,
motion to adopt ordinance number 240229-C to amend the city code, Title 9, Section 94.04, to update the city's noise ordinance to, among other things, clarify provisions related to the quiet hours and provide examples of violations of this ordinance to better protect the public health, safety, and general welfare of the city, its residents, and visitors.
Second.
all right, motion by Dean, second by Baldwin. Discussion.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, it was interesting after the planning commission meeting, Deputy Kling was in the back of the room and I went up to say hello and he said, "Hey Russ, do you know how many noise complaints we've had in the past 2 years?" Less than I can put on my 2 hands. So from a police perspective, at least Deputy Kling said noise complaints have not generally been an issue. So I reached out today to the undersheriff to ask him kind of what their experience is at a county level. And he said, you know, really, and I'll read this. He said, what's your professional experience with noise ordinances and their effectiveness and enforceability? He says, very difficult as far as prosecution. A calibrated decibel reader is required for enforcement. Certify and maintain the uses and equipment is intensive. Having said that, they are nice to have in order to hold people accountable in many situations without actually having to get through successful prosecution. In other words, if you can show someone that an ordinance exists and suggest to them that they're violating it, they generally quiet down for the night.
Okay.
So, and then he sent a link to an article that was written by our attorney, Chris Peterson, about noise ordinances. If you had not, Patterson,
That's
excuse me.
okay.
You did that too.
Thank you. I suggest you read it because it's interesting what's happening in Michigan is noise ordinances are generally, it looks to be on the way out. And more specifically, the issue I've got with this one is that there is no measurable standard. So if you say it was loud to me, well, what does loud mean? It's a very subjective policy. And so from a police perspective, of course, I don't speak on their behalf, but I would see there's going to be some challenges in enforcing this, even if we had a problem. And I don't really think we have a noise problem in Saugatuck, at least in my experience and what I'm hearing from the deputies I've spoken with. So again, I'm not going to stand in the way of it, but I think it's probably something we're going to be revisiting based on some case law that's coming. And even our Chris Patterson, one of our attorneys who's in front of this, is saying that this may be something that's on the way out statewide. So just want to put that on the table.
Okay. Anyone else?
I'd mentioned at the workshop that I think that it's okay if somebody mows their grass after 8 o'clock up to 9 o'clock at night on a summer night when it doesn't get dark till 9:30 or 10. And so therefore I can't support that. I don't think we have a noise problem. If we did have a noise problem and a documented noise problem, rather than just maybe not liking to hear leaf blowers early in the morning, you know, and again, like you said, with noise, everybody has their own opinion what noise is. I live downtown, like we spoke to one of our residents here that also lives downtown. Noise doesn't bother me. I hear the garbage truck right behind me at Wally's at 4:35 in the morning. And I know that, you know, I live in a city and so that's my opinion, that I chose to live, you know, where it's noisy. And I like the ordinance where it currently is, and I don't think we should change it.
Okay. Madam Mayor?
Yeah.
I actually would concur with, Mr. Gardner in that the reason for a noise ordinance is just to have something in place and people, when they know it's there and it makes sense. So to me, it's less about like, yelling at your neighbor because it's 8:15 and they've got the leaf blower than it is about just having something out there so that you can say to somebody who's maybe you've got a construction project behind you or whatever, and you can point to that and be like, can you guys not on a Sunday? Right. So I think it's more for that than it is just for you to just put in somebody's face every time. But I think that every city has a noise ordinance and there's nothing on here that gives me any kind of, pause.
Yeah, Mayor, if I may.
Yeah.
Members of my family will tell you that they believe I have selective hearing. So we all have, opinions, and we all have our own experiences with noise and our different tolerance levels of noise. So once again, that leads me back to the task force, which recommended this. Takes me back to the Planning Commission, which unanimously approved putting this before us. So I'm in favor of this ordinance.
Actually, Planning Commission was 6-1.
I thought you were 6-1 on B.
No, the noise ordinance, weren't we also 6-1 on the noise ordinance, RC?
I went back and checked the votes and I thought this was 7-0, but I could be incorrect.
It was 7
Well-
on everything but the moratorium, which was 6.
Okay, well, I stand corrected. I know I want to acknowledge that there has been pushback on the lawn equipment. And, I support the Planning Commission's decision. I also was one who raised that as an issue, the lawn noise. So, I just want to raise to council, if people think that's overreach, we should discuss that.
Okay.
Throwing that out there.
Any more discussion on it? Okay, so it's
Just the current noise ordinance where it is, it's from 7 AM to, just to clarify. right,
7 AM to 9 PM.
9 PM.
So took an hour off each end.
Right. Yeah, okay.
okay.
I'm a fan of this because I see it's the commercial crews for me. I mentioned this at the workshop. I come through, they operate outside of these hours sometimes, and that drives me up the wall because then they're going door to door to door to door to, it gets weird sometimes. So this, doesn't prevent, I don't think, people from having healthy conversations with their neighbors to say, hey, I would appreciate it. I'm having dinner outside. It's 9 o'clock, please. Stop doing that. But, I would do like this as a way to kind of corral more commercial activity that does operate during business hours, so.
Okay.
Thanks for the point.
Any further discussion? Okay, thank you, Logan. Any further discussion? All right, if the clerk could please call the roll.
Anderson,
Yes.
Baldwin.
Yes.
Dean,
Yes.
Gardner,
Yes.
Muncy,
No.
Stanton.
Yes.
White,
Yes.
motion carries.
All right, thank you, everyone. On to 15D, the short-term rental police power moratorium, R1 residential zoning district. Ryan?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And at your workshop meeting, I kind of went to, some detail about the history. Certainly welcome to, I'll repeat it if need be, but the Planning Commission during their discussions on whether they wanted to further study residential caps, or sorry, caps in general, had a robust discussion. And so they agreed, they had a consensus that agreed with the task force that, a cap citywide was not something that they were interested in exploring, and a cap in commercial zoning district was not something that they were interested in exploring. But they did express an interest in looking at the residential zoning districts and whether a cap of some sort might be necessary, maybe at a neighborhood type level. And our consulting planner, David Jurasik, kind of provided some recommendations to them on really what the type of work that would need to occur to study the areas and analyze the neighborhoods, and then kind of come up with determining whether or not they may actually warrant caps, and then the different methods to do that. And so during the Planning Commission's discussion, they raised that they had previously recommended a police powers moratorium on new short-term rental certificates, and that previous recommendation was going to be a moratorium on new short-term rental certificates throughout the city. In this case, the planning commission recommended to you in a 6-1 vote that you reconsider a police power moratorium on new short-term rental licenses, but that you narrow it to just residential zoning districts, and that moratorium be in effect for 6 months. And so at your workshop meeting, you had some discussion about this, and we're at that time agreed to at least have our legal counsel draft some language for you to look at and discuss this evening. So before you are two options to consider. You could choose to consider one or the other or neither. They're all within your purview. And I apologize because they're actually a little mixed in your packet. So the one marked 24022-9D is actually option 2. And the one 240229E is actually option 1. So D is option 2 and E is option 1. So I apologize, they're flipped in your packet. So I'll discuss option 2 since it's listed first ordinance wise in your packet. Essentially what that would do would place a 6-month moratorium on new short-term rental licenses in the R1 residential zoning districts. And so I provided a list of those in your packet as well as a map showing you where those would be at. It makes exceptions for any short-term rental applications that were received prior to today's meeting date. And then it specifically allows for any short-term rental certificate that exists that would have expired during the moratorium period to automatically be extended until the end of the moratorium plus an additional 30 days after. So if somebody were in a situation where they're an existing owner and their short-term rental certificate were to expire during the moratorium period, that certificate continues on throughout the moratorium, they can continue operating as it up to 30 days afterwards. The piece that option 2 kind of, what it has that option 1 doesn't have is consideration for any home that was for sale prior to today's date and was used as a short-term rental. And what that would allow is any property that's been on the market, it's been used as a short-term rental, and it's been for sale prior to this date. If they sell during the moratorium period and it changes ownership, then that owner of that property would then be able to apply for a license as long as they did it within 30 days of the sale of the property. So option 2 has a little bit of extra flexibility we heard some concerns last time from folks saying, hey, it's already been on the market, it's already been used as a short-term rental. That kind of addresses maybe that concern if you're interested in that. Otherwise, option 1 doesn't have that carve out for any properties that are currently for sale.
All right, do I have a motion?
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
motion to adopt ordinance number 240229-D to enact a temporary moratorium on the issuance of short-term rental licenses within the city's R1 zoning districts until 6 months from the effective date of this ordinance or an earlier time in which the city adopts new regulations governing the activities regulated in this ordinance.
Second.
All right, I have a motion by Baldwin, second by Anderson. Any discussion?
If I may?
Yes.
I liked the option 2. I am sensitive to the argument from property owners that have listed their property and they've got, I hear that you've got some bookings through September, all the way through summer and that, and it makes sense. There's got to be some fairness, I think, in this. If you've had a property and it's a short-term rental, and I think that in those cases that we have to give some breathing room, and it just seems like the fair thing for me to do. It seems like the fair thing to me for us to do. That's all I want to say.
Okay. Anyone else? Go ahead, Russ.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, thank you. This seems to me to be a solution in search of a problem. I've had we've been inundated. We've all been inundated with messages and comments from the public. And I'm still struggling with what exactly this will do for us. I talked with the zoning administrator prior to the meeting. As soon as the word moratorium gets out there, as it did before, all of a sudden there could be a rush of permits requested. And I don't know if you got some numbers for us, Ryan, but I'm a no on this. And let me explain why. Again, I think it's a solution in search of a problem that we don't have. And more importantly is that we've passed some significant legislation this evening to begin to control some of the issues and manage the issues that the community has been telling us that is a problem with rentals. Some of the pictures that are in the packet demonstrate, at least up on Pleasant Street, some of the issues that they faced. We have a lot of work to do to get this, what I call that first phase into place, get the controls into place, you know, get the solution to the enforcement in place, figure our way out through that. And then what's the next step? What exactly are we trying to solve? And in my opinion, you know, what is important for the city to discuss is what do we want this community to look like 30, 40 years down the road? Caps, I want to separate caps from the moratorium because the caps themselves may be a solution to a perceived problem. The problem is not really well defined, in my opinion, quite yet, but I think that's a conversation to have with the planning commission they're clearly motivated to have that conversation about caps. That will be proposed back to the council at some future point, and that will be discussed. And I'm sure it will generate a lot of comments and concerns, as we've seen with even just the word moratorium. But I think caps are a whole different conversation. I don't see a need for a moratorium to really react to anything. And as a matter of fact, the status quo today, as many people have said, you know, most people are in pretty good shape. People can rent their homes. There's a permit process, which we're going to be doing a better job with. And I just don't see where this is going to solve any problem that we have. So therefore I'm a no, and I would just say, let's work on first things first and what we passed tonight with our police ordinances.
Okay, anyone else?
Mayor,
Yes.
this is a tough one. This is a tough one. I'm prepared to be a yes on this because I want us to have all the tools available to us. Having said that, it's very complicated. There's two options here. If the deputy mayor who made the motion is willing to withdraw it, I would be in favor of tabling this because what it does is it basically does the same thing. If we have a moratorium there in our toolbox that we can deploy if we need to, if things get out of hand again, we can act quickly and deploy one of these options or put it up for a vote, I should say. I think everybody needs to realize that you're going to see in the packet for the next council meeting, a letter from a number of citizens. Last count, I think it was over 100 signatures of people that, you know, want us to take action around caps. And that's enough names for a ballot initiative. So we could basically put this in the hands of the people, or the people could put it in their own hands, and we could have a ballot initiative on a cap within 249 days. That's kind of a sledgehammer approach because they're just going to, you know, a ballot initiative is going to be simple and it's going to probably have just a number. It's going to probably have a percentage in it. My hope would be that this council, along with our planners, could continue to work the problem because that's what we got elected to do. I don't want to see this tool go away because I think it's a valuable tool because people aren't communicating out to the rest of the population that, you know, only maybe pick up the paper or look at their social media feed and they think something's going on in Saugatuck. You know, but they're you know, living in their own echo chambers from time to time, and they're not seeing what some of us on this council are seeing. And I've seen a petition signed by more than 100 residents who put their names to paper. That's enough people for a ballot initiative, folks. And if you want to, you know, roll the dice on a ballot initiative in November, you know, the community can do that. I would urge my colleagues on council to rethink this. I would hate to see this tool fail and fall off the radar because it has raised awareness of the issue. And really, by raising awareness to this issue, it created our short-term rental task force. Had we not seen that moratorium early last year, there might not have been the kind of poke to get everybody to say, okay, let's get to the table. Let's talk short-term rentals. That task force contained voters, residents, and people from outside the community that have business interests in Saugatuck. So for that reason, I would hate to see this fail. I would respectfully ask my colleague across the table to consider withdrawing her motion and amending it to table, because I would hate to lose this tool.
Okay, Scott. Anyone else?
Sure. I think that's great, folks, in fact, talking about putting it on a ballot, I know I had a casual conversation with one of our council folks a week or two ago, and I thought, well, maybe this is the best thing to be on a ballot, That way the folks can, say what they say. Well, but they're, say, they can express themselves. I'm sorry. I'm really at a loss of words
That's okay.
today, aren't I?
It's a lot.
But I'm not gonna make that persuade me, on how I feel. That to feel that, oh, there's a bunch of folks and that, are gonna, make this a ballot issue. Because if it becomes a ballot issue, then great. Then we are hearing from the people. And that's what I want to do. That's what I've been trying to do. I've been keeping track of all your emails. And I have well over 100 that are, that don't want to see this moratorium go through. And yes, I did see that. There is a ballot out there, or I mean,
Petition.
Petition,
Thank
a
you.
petition.
Out there. So this is important to me. I'm not a stakeholder in any way, shape or form. There's no way, as far as, I don't have a rental house. I don't make money from this industry. I'm a contract worker, and I do not get a W-2 from anybody that is in this industry. And so I don't really have a lot in it. I just have what I'm hearing and what I'm bringing in, and I can't vote for it. I'm still, I know there's 100 on that petition, but I've heard more than 100 from our residents, from my neighbors. One of my neighbors lived around the corner that lives right here in the city, from folks that have lived here for generations. Those are the voices I'm listening to. And again, it's still, I'll be voting no.
Just to respond to that, Mayor.
Yeah, go ahead.
I continue to see this, if we table it, as a fire extinguisher. It's a fire extinguisher that we can have. We hope we don't have to use it. But if once again, things get out of hand, it's another tool in our toolbox to bring before the council for a vote. So I think it's prudent to keep it. If I'm forced to vote, I'll vote yes. But I'd rather table it for now because I think it does the same thing. If we table it, people will know that this council is serious about working the problem and doing what we were elected to do, which is to solve problems. So that's where I am.
Go ahead, Gregory.
If I may.
Yeah.
I think it's quite clear to the city that we've been working very hard with this whole thing. And I'm not, again, to echo Russ Gardner. I don't know, if this is needed for a study that I don't think that it's needed.
Okay. Logan, did you want to add anything? Okay, at this point, as far as some things that Scott was saying, I've been very torn on this issue because I can see both sides of it. I wish I was in a position that I am absolutely in favor of the moratorium or absolutely opposed to it, but I just see both sides of it. I just do. So my worry is that there would be a point like South Haven, who chose to do an emergency moratorium because they got 27 applications for short-term rentals. We're not South Haven, I realize this, but it was enough to jar them to do a moratorium in a way that, hey, we've got to be careful because we might lose a lot of our residents in town that might be full-time renters, and a lot of those homes might be flipping and turning to vacation rentals, and a lot of those folks might go away in the city of South Haven. We have a different makeup in our town. I realize that. We don't have a lot of hotels on Blue Star Highway. I kind of wish we did personally, maybe a couple. I don't need it to get that big, but I'd take one or two just because there's a lot of people that are getting married here in town. They're going to the Ivy House, that beautiful place. And maybe they just want to stay one night and a hotel might do that. And maybe the market corrects itself. I like the idea of, if we turn this down, if there's an emergency situation where I feel compelled, I feel like it needs to be there as something that we could say, We're not doing this now, but if something comes up where we feel really adamant that we have to hurry up and do something, if we tabled it, I feel like we could bring it back at a future time. If we say no, it's a no. If we say yes, we're going forward with a moratorium, and I feel like it's a happy medium. To table it until it's an emergency situation. I don't feel like we're in an emergency situation. I feel like the way the market is right now, we might be already on a pause. That's just my feelings.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I'd like to ask the acting city manager, how many new applications we got for short-term rentals?
So since the planning commission meeting, we've had 31 applications. 8 of those would be for, completely new short-term rental units. The others are renewal applications, and some of that's, I think, some folks, are expiring in a few months and wanted to get the new certificate. There's new yearly regulations coming, so I think that had an impact. But 31 applications since your planning commission meeting a couple weeks ago, and 8 of those are for completely new short-term rentals. I have in total right now 46 that are pending, and 11 would be completely new.
11 would be completely new since the meeting. Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Madam Mayor.
Did you want to,
Just
I'm
to
sorry,
clarify,
just to
that
clarify.
11 number was in total, that are just pending, but 8 of those came from
Brand
since
new.
the planning commission.
Okay.
meeting. Yep.
and are those in the residential area or are those in the whole town?
So it varies. I can tell you exactly what districts if you'd like.
You don't have to, but it's just of note because the moratorium is based on new applications in the residential zones.
Right. So.
That's okay.
Yeah, I can tell you exactly the addresses and what district it's in if you want them,
There
take
were 8, right?
since the planning commission meeting. Yep.
Okay,
So
since February 15th.
Right.
Okay,
143 Elizabeth is in the community residential districts. 990 Ridgeview is in the Maple Street district. Both of those would be subject to the moratorium. 582 Campbell would be new. That's in the Peninsula West district, which would be subject to the moratorium. 660 Lake would be new. That's in the Lake Street district and would not be subject to the moratorium because it's an R2 district. 515 Park and 842 Lake, there's a unit in both of those. Both of those are in the resort district and would not be subject to the moratorium. 419 St. Joseph would be new, and that is in the community residential district. 441 Frederick would be new, and that would be in the Peninsula West district.
okay.
I think that's all the new ones.
So 5.
Mhm.
Yeah, okay.
Within the moratorium areas.
Okay. Just to counter that, I mean, I know recently there have been homes that have been purchased that were short-term rentals that have turned into long-term residents. There's some people where that has happened. And I can only say it anecdotally because I don't have the data on that. I can only say it anecdotally.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Point of order on tabling the motion, if that's determined to be the action we want to take. When we table it, my understanding from Robert's Rules of Order is that we have to take action on it at our next meeting. Is that, how does, I just want to make sure we understand what tabling this means.
Who's our
Go ahead.
parliamentarian
Jake.
here with Robert's rules? So.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just know in the past when we've tabled things, we can decide if it comes back up on an agenda. Is that correct?
My understanding is that you could table to a date certain, or if you simply table, then it would come up at your next meeting, but we can do a little research while you're further discussing.
Madam Mayor, I do have another question though. If it were to say fail,
Yeah.
then what's to stop us from, why would that preclude us from doing it again? If, you know what I mean? If we decided there was an emergency reason to have it all of a sudden and it already failed, what would stop us from bringing it up again?
That's a
Well,
good.
legal counsel disagrees, I think.
Honestly, I sort of feel like we all kind of need to go on the record as to where we are on this.
Yeah.
So it just seems like, I think that we owe it to the public. They put us here to deliberate this. It's our job. We've got, most people on record as to where they want to go. If it fails tonight, again, I accept that it's democracy and I am happy to live with that. But I do think that, we've gone around about this for nearly 2 years. And, I think that we owe it to our public to everyone go on the record. And if it fails, like I said, I'll live with it. And if we need to have an emergency, then we do it again.
Mayor, if I may.
Yeah.
I guess my concern is for the public, the moratorium fails and isn't held out there as a tool that the city can use in an emergency situation. The word on the street will be moratorium failed in Saugatuck. That'll be the headline. And a lot of people won't really dig down into the details of this meeting, what the task force did, what the planning commission did. And I would really hate for people to make decisions when they know this is very much a live issue in our city. I will repeat, I was looking at a petition for more than 100 people in Saugatuck. That's enough people for a ballot initiative. And I would hate for somebody to be surprised in 249 days when, basically the people of Saugatuck voted for a sledgehammer approach to this problem, where this body could continue to work it. So I just really hope that doesn't happen.
And I do want to express that I am in favor of the Planning Commission doing what the Short-Term Rental Task Force asked of them, and that is to study the residential caps and what that looks like. And it is a lot of work that is ahead of you that we're asking of you. I don't know that the moratorium needs to happen necessarily. I feel like the work needs to happen. This is a weird time because this is when people put houses up for sale. That can complicate all of this. So I do want to get on the record that I want the Planning Commission to continue the good work of digging into this and, studying caps further, studying our neighborhoods further, studying our zones further, to make sure we're doing it right and protecting our neighborhoods. Go ahead.
Thank you. I want to make for the record straight as well, and so that folks know that I'm very aware that we do have some problems with our short-term rentals. I think and I'm glad that we're taking the approach that we are. This is not easy. We've all had a couple of hard weeks. I've been on the phone with all of you. We've sat down and talked. I don't know if folks know the weight that this really comes on to the council. I know a couple folks have said, I know you guys have had a hard week. I've got, I'm hearing from both sides as well. And I respect both sides as well. But I have to agree with Helen Baldwin. We've been working on this for a long time. And I'm not really that in favor of tabling this. Let's get it done. I think we know where a lot of us stand already. I think we should, I believe in working on it now.
So to be clear, though, there's nothing to prevent us if this were to fail tonight, there would be nothing preventing us from picking it up if we need to have an emergency injunction, whatever you want to characterize it. Is that correct?
Correct. I mean, legal counsel can correct me, but there's nothing that would prohibit you from later, discussing it.
Yeah, no, that's totally accurate. And I mean, a short-term rental moratorium was before the council before, and that did not prevent the issue from being raised again.
That's true. But it wasn't voted on by council. So council didn't vote on it before.
We
It
never
just,
took it
it didn't, it was
So,
brought up in
so
workshop. and not-
could you tell us the difference between the fact that the city council itself never voted on the previous moratorium suggestion from Planning Commission? This is now where we are taking a vote, and can we bring it back up again
Yeah,
if we actually take
It
a
could
vote?
be- Yeah, it can be brought up again regardless. And to the point of order question, tabling would require moving it to a certain date. I think there is a function where you could postpone it indefinitely, but as a practical matter, voting on it now, if it fails, you would have the option later, should circumstances change, to take another vote on whether or not this is something that the council wants to do.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
And then also.
I'm sorry, go ahead,
Yeah.
Gregory. Yeah.
If there are folks that think that we need to put it on the ballot, I think that's a good idea. Helen and I sat down for a couple minutes a couple weeks ago, and we talked about this issue, and I thought this should go to the ballot right away. rather than the headache that we've been getting from all of it. The people should speak. I'm trying to listen to the people.
Yeah.
And the people should speak, and so be it. If it does go to a ballot, then good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Russ.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I hope I cover all the points. Great comments. I love this conversation. So I appreciate using the word emergency. I do not feel urgency around a moratorium. I don't feel that there's a problem that needs immediate solution like this. That's my personal opinion. I also look at, I'm not in support of or against caps at this point because nothing's been presented. So that petition that was shared with us today was regarding caps. And I would fully support the planning commission or even perhaps the council appointing a special group that would study caps as an option, as a solution to the problem. And I don't know what that problem really is. I don't know what that definition is quite yet. I think that we're going to find some improvement through this police powers that we've adopted. I think that's going to alleviate a lot of the concerns that people have about short-term rentals. But I also would challenge that planning commission or that group that's going to study this and say, okay, where do you want this community to be in 20, 30 years? We didn't get to today in the past year. This has been an evolution of time, economic conditions, pandemic, et cetera. That's in constant motion. So again, I still think we have some work to do to decide if there's still a problem we need to resolve, and caps may be one solution. There may be others that are out there too that we haven't even talked about. So I want to make sure that it's understood that I'm not opposed to caps or in support of caps. I'm not opposed to further study of it and for presentations back to council about what our options look like. So I just want to be sure. The moratorium seems to me to be a problem, again, in search of a solution, or a solution in search of a problem.
Madam Mayor,
Yeah.
I guess where I land on the moratorium is it came to us from planning after careful deliberation with a 6-1 vote. We ask our committees and commissions to do their work and bring things to us. To denigrate that by having them do the work and bring it to us, and for nothing new that we've added or noticed that they failed to look at, to let that fail. It doesn't sit right with me. It's just asking for time. It's asking for time to look at caps and do the further study and have some breathing room and not be completely, inundated with applications. But and I don't think that there's anything wrong with asking the members of council to go on record as to their feelings. I've been very open about mine and very transparent, and I feel very comfortable with that. And I would ask the same for all of my colleagues.
Yeah, I mean, we're wrapping up, I think, but, I mean, I got voted into office, to deal with this issue. I very much want to deal with this issue. I fully believe the voters will lose patience with a number of us if we don't take action on this, and they will take action on their own. Therefore, I will be a yes unless we want to hold this back. So we don't have this whipsawing of moratoriums back, moratoriums gone, moratoriums back, moratoriums gone. So we could either table it and just keep that tool alive, or we can vote and just kind of have a straw poll and we'll see where we are.
Okay, Logan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will be voting against this. I will be voting against this because I don't believe caps are a great solution. Anyone who watched the candidate roundtable put on by the League of Women Voters will know that that's what I was running on. So they won't be surprised by that. I think this is tied to moratorium. I think caps are tied to the moratorium because the moratorium is exploring the possibility of caps. I'd like to zoom out a little bit. I'd like to thank the Planning Commission for all the work that went into the ordinances. That's a huge step for us.
Yeah.
It's been kind of the Wild West for short-term rentals here for a while, and it's put us in this position. So I'm really proud of that group, and I'm proud of us for taking care of that action. I know we have some fine tuning to do on that. We will continue to do that, but I really hesitate to pull a huge lever like this so suddenly with no ramp up. We didn't do this. We didn't pass ordinances a long time ago. This is a town is a large machine, and putting such a huge input into it with no regard for, no regard is a little aggressive. There's a lot of regard for this. But without good data on the effect that our ordinances are going to have, I think is a little careless. I'm also frustrated with the the moratorium as a whole, because there's not a lot of information in here and about exactly what we're getting for this. You know, this is gonna have a cost, whether I'm a little frustrated with the hyperbole around the cost in both directions of this. But the fact of the matter is there will be a cost to this, and I don't know what I'm getting for our time and money on this. I'm also frustrated that there's a planning commission. I think they do, one funny comment earlier I thought was the planning commission rushing things. You pay attention to those meetings, they do not rush. They're very
Right.
careful and deliberate on things. So I know that there's a lot of sincerity in this, but I would ask for some more clarity and diligence around what's behind this and what we're getting for this. I'm not saying I would never consider something like this, you know, because of that, but it's unlikely because I don't ultimately believe in the end result of this. And that's most of it. There's a lot. Could probably give a TED talk on this right now. But, you know,
I've got that for a few days.
exactly. So that's where I am with this.
Logan, thank you. Anyone else? Okay.
So, yeah, I kind of do have a TED Talk. Not quite. But first of all, I really appreciate everybody's engagement, everybody around this table, planning, all of the people who have come to meetings and spoken out. It's a tough issue and it's a critical issue. And it's an issue I have spent, I've spent many hundreds of hours thinking about and researching. As a member of planning, and I think Steve Manns did a great job speaking, it is demoralizing that once again, planning brings a recommendation to city council at city council's, and city council says, nah, and it was a 6-1 vote. So that's frustrating, but I also really respect everybody's opinion, and I love that we can have difficult discussions and regard each other well at the end. I am going to spend some time though talking about this. As Logan said, I agree, a cap and a moratorium. A moratorium is sort of a short-term cap. So I'm going to conflate them a little bit. I do support the moratorium. I do support caps. That won't surprise anybody. There's been a lot of misinformation, and I want to correct some of that. Joe Clark did a great job earlier on talking about the data that came out of the short-term rental task force. Residents do support caps. When you look at Saugatuck City residents, 60% of them favor residential caps. So people say, oh, it's 60%. So 100 people on a petition, 60% of the people who took that survey. On the Hill, it's 70% or 68%. And on Peninsula West, west of the river, those neighborhoods west of the river at 70%. That's a clear mandate. 70% on the Hill. And I think we have to listen to that. Some on the task have said the task force made a recommendation against caps, and that's not true. It was 2 for, 2 against, and 3 50-50. 2 people weren't there. Our mayor was unable to be there in person, so she was unable to deliberate, and there was 1 other person. But it was a total lack of consensus. So I want to be sure everybody knows that. It's great, that the task force, the recommendations coming out, that we pass that, go us, that's a huge thing. And so that's great. And that's not misinformation. And I just want to be clear with everybody too, that a moratorium would not cause any current short-term rental license holder. It's not going to prevent them from getting a new license. They would need to get their new license under the new terms. But people aren't going to lose their short-term rental licenses because of this. We might halt new residential licenses, but we would grandfather in people who have them, and there's been misinformation about that. The other piece of evidence that I think supports a cap, and I think it compels City Council to pass and propose both the moratorium and the cap, is our master plan. Master plans are, they're required by Michigan Zoning Enabling Act. So this is Michigan law to have a master plan. And the Tri-Community Master Plan, which reflects significant input from local residents, was unanimously passed by the cities of Saugatuck, Village of Douglas, and Saugatuck Township in 2016. And the purpose of it is to establish policies and goals that provide direction for future community development and growth from people like us. I mean, we are supposed to look at and use that as guidance. So I don't think that actually, okay, so with the overarching goal of the master plan, and I'm going to read this directly, it's the long-term goal of this joint master plan to improve the quality of life for all citizens in the tri-communities through implementations and policies and best practices that preserve the existing small town rural character of the area and achieve sustainable development that is, which meets the needs of present generations without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. And it goes on, the first article of the master plan is about retaining the small town rural community. 34% of homes on the Hill is not a small town rural community. And what's interesting about the master plan too, is it understands the inextricable link between our tourism economy, our natural resources, you know, the dunes, the riverfront, and our neighborhoods. And they're all three linked together. And we have to keep them in balance and we have to preserve all of them. And so I really encourage you as we continue to deliberate and think about this to spend time on the master plan. I mean, it is our policy guide. We've also heard a lot about the economic impact of STRs, and some of the correspondence has made it sound like the Planning Commission and the Short-Term Rental Task Force and Council are making decisions in a data vacuum, and that's simply not true. Both the Planning Commission and Task Force members received the South Haven report, which was called Estimating the Economic Impacts of Short-Term Rentals on the City of South Haven, came out a year ago. And there was good information there, but the word estimating, there were a lot of assumptions and estimates, as all reports like that have. And we read it, and we had the opportunity to ask both the task force and planning commission had the opportunity to ask for a similar study and felt like there was data that was sufficient. I think it's also sort of interesting and maybe ironic that just last week, South Haven imposed a 6-month moratorium on short-term rental licenses, residential neighborhoods with their exhaustive study. It was a $25,000 report that took them 6 months to do. And we can learn from it. We have that. The short-term rental task force, you know this, we looked at a lot of data. I think Kelly referenced that. We looked at housing trends, home ownership trends. There was a lot of data. And on planning, I will say one planning commissioner did ask for a big report, but the rest of the planning commission, it didn't have traction. We all know that short-term rentals are vital. I mean, they are huge for our tourism economy, and I know we all want to keep them. But the question really is balance. I mean, and 31% overall, 25% west of the river, 34% on the Hill. I mean, that's not balance, and it's fundamentally changed how it is to live in those areas and the quality and neighborhood feel of our neighborhoods. And a lot of residents are unhappy about it, as evidenced by the recent poll, as evidenced by the survey, which had a pretty clear support for caps. Agree that what we passed tonight is great, but it doesn't get at the fundamental issue, which is density. And the only way to address density is caps. So, final thought on economic data and getting more is I think it's actually far more instructive to look at what other communities similar to ours have done. We've talked about East Bay Charter Township and Charlevoix. They came to planning and presented. I've gotten some more data from them on how the caps have affected their real estate values. It hasn't. I mean, the values have continued to rise. Medium home prices in East Bay Township, Charter Township in the year, excuse me, for 2019 increased 5%. They were up 16% in 2020, 18% in 2021, 15% in 22, and 3% in 2023. In Charlevoix, same sort of trend, up 13% 2019, the year their cap was implemented, 11% in 2020, 16% in 2021, 6% in 2022, 1% last year. Their Visitors Bureau has a program that pings cell phone data to count people entering Charlevoix and removes recurring pings that would come from residents. Daily visitors have increased 4 million, from 4 million to 5.7 million from 2020 to 2023. The Visitor Bureau conclusion in Charlevoix, the cap on short-term rentals has not impacted people being able to come here and stay here. Now, criticisms of Charlevoix and East Bay Township was that they have hotels. So I looked at Sutton Bay. Sutton's Bay has, it's very similar to Saugatuck, no big hotels, older population. They put a cap in at the end of 22. They have capped it at 45, and they're currently above the cap by 13. So the cap is in effect. Talked to a realtor there today. Home values were up 8% last year. He said that some people might not get quite as much as they wanted. The values are still strong and everybody's making money when they sell their houses. So officials from all three of these committees, and these are like the Ryan counterparts and the, you know, people who work for the cities, have all said that when they raised these issues, all of the same people showed up and made all of the same, you know, claims that people have made to us, and that none of those dire predictions have come true.
If we could keep our comments in the audience down, just so we can hear.
None of those predictions have come true. And they were also clear in their belief that caps have been a good thing for their communities. We have our own economic data. We talked about a moratorium last year. Everybody was afraid we're going to create our home values. Didn't happen. You know, home values were strong last year. And I'm skipping some of this because I know we're getting tight on time and I'm talking long. But I'll just again, 60% of our residents support it across all of our community. I just want to wrap up. Several people have said that I have an agenda. And so I want to say, yes, I do. Agenda is a loaded word, but I'll claim it. You know, like Logan, I ran on short-term rentals and I was running on capping them. And I had a lot of people when I walked the neighborhoods, a lot of people were excited about that. They were glad that somebody was going to speak up for them. And people I have talked to since say, thank you for representing the neighbors. Communities are more than investments. They are where we live. There are homes, there are our neighbors. I've been completely transparent about my support for caps on planning, such as short-term rental task force and here. And I'm proud of that. I pledge that I will continue to fight the good fight. I believe this is important and I will do everything I do. I think this is going to go down, but I will do everything I can to keep it alive. So I am a strong yes.
Okay.
And thank you for listening. This is really important to me.
Thank you. Go ahead, Russ.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I would just thank you, Councilmember Anderson, for all of that data. Again, in my mind, caps are a further discussion. There's clearly some interest on both sides of the community, whether you're a resident, whether you're a property owner who doesn't live here and has a short-term rental. There's clearly some interest in having discussions about caps. What's on the table this evening is a moratorium on
Understood.
permits. Let me finish. So talking about caps is really kind of premature in my estimation, because we haven't even gotten there yet. It's just a matter of whether we decide to shut down the market at the moment to allow that work to take place. I think that work can take place without a moratorium, frankly. And again, action has been taken. And action has been taken. And I think that's a big thing to remember, is that we've moved forward on some pretty significant things this evening. And the Planning Commission, the Short-Term Rental Task Force have done a tremendous amount of work. And I was part of the Planning Commission process to get here. So I'm very comfortable with where we are. I think the status quo, as was mentioned by the mayor. I've had 3 homes within a block radius of mine that have become full-time residents that were previously rentals. One right across the street from me. Pleased about that, but if they had been short-term rentals and continued, that's fine too. My neighborhood is my neighborhood, and I make the best effort, as do the people that live around me, to make it as neighborly, even if they're short-term visitors or if they live there full-time.
Howard, did you want to
I
follow up
want to
on
make
that?
a quick
Yeah.
clarification. So Russ, the reason why I talked about caps is because a moratorium is a 6-month cap. And so the economic doom and gloom and all of that, when you look at what other communities do, whether it's a moratorium and I think everybody but Sutton's Bay did do a moratorium, it's the same issues. And so, I hear what you're saying, but in terms of the economic impact, and it is effectively a 6-month cap. So a lot of the information is relevant.
Thank you.
Just, so everyone's clear, where we're talking about, well, what's a cap, what's not a cap? Of course, moratoriums, it could be looked at a cap, just like occupancy limit. We just passed a cap, if you want to think about it, of how many people can be in a house. I do not have a problem with studying and short-term rental studying. I know that there are problems in our community. We wouldn't be having so many people saying that there are. I just don't think that we need this moratorium to go forward.
Any other discussion? Go ahead, Logan.
Thank you, Member Anderson, for that. It's clear you put a lot of thought into that, as of a lot of us. I agree with a lot of what you're saying.
We can't hear you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Just saying I agree with a lot of what Member Anderson's saying. I think a lot of us are actually really close on a lot of the things that we value in this community. So it's a little frustrating to watch us go at each other a little bit like this. But my issue with this is that it ultimately leads to caps. And I would just like to expand on that really quickly. It's that I understand the impulse for caps. Totally get it. It's frustrating to watch someone turn one of your neighbor's houses, that was a family home, into a business. And I think that's an issue. I just watched it happen next door to me and my grandparents. That was hard to watch. And I understand the impulse to grab a big old hammer like caps and tear into things about this. But here's the problem with the caps, in my opinion, is that I don't think that the effects of the caps are going to be what people want. I think there are better tools, and that's what I want to push back to the Planning Commission, to say, let's look at all the different tools that we have on the table. And if it's so urgent that we need to stop a moratorium, which I'm not convinced it is, then let's get after it, And one of the specific ways that I see the caps working out is people want to do that because they think it's some way to react back towards what's being done to their community. And I understand the impulse again, but if you put a cap on that house, on our houses, I don't think that house is going away. It's not changing. What's happening is you're likely cementing that house as a rental well beyond, possibly even your lifetime. That's a really tough thing to look at. So I just think it's a little reflexive, and, I hear the call I want to hear from the citizens on ballot initiative. I'm not afraid of that. I think anytime things get brought to the people, that's a great thing. But I would just urge them to consider, just to think into the second step of what would happen there. And I know you want something specific with your neighbor's properties. I'd like to remind you that's not really your place a little bit most of the time. You can buy it if you want to control it. It's people can do things with their property.
Well, except many of us live in residential neighborhoods. And I think it is unrealistic to expect people to live in a residential neighborhood where a third of the houses are running commercial enterprises. So I do think, the whole purpose of zoning and, planning are to, we have residential neighborhoods in zones for a reason. It's to be residential. So, and one other thing, our job is, if it gets to a ballot initiative, okay, but we're supposed to, this is our job.
Yeah.
And, this has been kicked down the road for years. I mean, look at all these other communities in Michigan who took action years ago, and we're still like wringing our hands. And we can keep our vibrant tourism economy. We can and protect our neighborhoods and support our wonderful local businesses. We can do it. I think we get into this binary, well, we can have tourism or we can have neighborhoods. And it's like, no, we can have them both. We just need to balance them. And I think, and I would argue, I do argue, we're out of balance. And at what point, I think it was Steve said, I mean, is it 35%, 40%? I mean, it's just, I'm gobsmacked in a
Yep.
loving kind. I mean, I love, actually, I think we're speaking pretty, I like how we're all talking.
yeah.
I think it's respectful and I really, I'm kind of digging that our vibe is good and that we have had less fury directed at us tonight.
And I want to talk about,
Get to,
if I may.
may I respond?
Yeah,
Mayor,
go ahead.
Madam Mayor.
Is it okay if he responds to what she said? Okay.
I appreciate what you're saying. I'd like to agree really extremely with the point of not making it binary. I think there was just some gamesmanship about drawing what I was saying into a place where you could
Oh,
argue with it
so
convincingly.
tell me, because I didn't
I
intend
do
to do
think
that.
that there are mechanisms that we need to explore
I
to
am,
control the short-term rentals. What I'm saying is specifically a cap, which is definitely the focus of this moratorium, is not an articulate or capable way of doing that.
okay,
That will
well,
So-
we can disagree on that. And talk more. I look forward to talking more with you
Mhm.
about that.
Good, go ahead.
Just one
Helen.
thing I want to say is that property rights, of course, I'm for property rights in that, but that doesn't give you the right to do anything. I can't just run a daycare without a license. I can't just hang a shingle out. I'm a CPA. I don't get to just operate that. So it goes
Again,
beyond,
you're taking away rights rather than making up.
it
random
goes
things.
beyond when you live next to a corporation, an existing business, I can't just decide I'm going to have a auto shop out of my garage. So,
You don't have the right to do that currently, though.
correct.
That's what I'm saying.
Well, I think that we haven't put the enforcements on these things. We've gotten it so far out of control. This should have been done way long ago. So this is out of hand now because councils before us and us to this point have failed to address it. That's my view. I just want to say.
I mean, I really fear that, if we don't continue to take action as a council, people won't come to the table. They won't continue to dialogue. I think we had a great dialogue among the community, people that vote here, people that live here, and people that don't during the task force. And, you can call it a moratorium, you can call it a cap, you can call it a pause. It's a temporary pause in my mind. Frankly, I think it keeps everybody talking. It keeps things live. Otherwise, one anti-moratorium group is going to go declare victory and they'll say it's all over for Saugatuck. Group of voters will go here and they're going to come up with their own ballot proposal. And it might be a number, that could have ended up somewhere in the middle, because I think there's going to be a number. It's not going to be a Charlevoix. It's not going to be a 6%, but I don't think this community can sustain 30% short-term rentals. I think the voters are going to tell us loud and clear in November how they feel about this. So we either stay in the game as a council or we leave it to the voters to decide. I'd rather stay in the game and keep engaging with the voters on this.
And I think it just comes down to the matter of the moratorium, right? Like all of this seems like there's a lot more research that needs to be done. And, for me, the moratorium, bad timing, as far as when this moratorium is coming up. There's a lot of, this is when homes, again, go up for sale. There's a lot of things that I feel like need to be addressed, and the moratorium scares people and it gets people in thinking that we're closing the doors on Saugatuck to tourism, because that's just kind of, the word moratorium can be threatening. And I don't like that. We have a strong short-term rental, a strong short-term rental group in our town, because again, we don't have a lot of other options as far as where people stay in our community. This is a tourist town. And I agree with so much of what Holly said. We're looking to help our residents to find a balance. I just don't know that I'm ready to do a moratorium to do that quite and do more research so we can get there and find that balance.
When I may, if I may.
Yes.
When I think of balance in this town too, what I think about is what brings people here and what makes me want to live here myself, which is our wonderful downtown that's populated by our incredible small business owners. And with the perspective that I have on this community being long-term, I remember when downtown Saugatuck wasn't as healthy as it is right now. And it's still not, I think, as good as it could be. And I'm not willing to throw the balance, to pump the brakes and throw the balance in the other direction, because I think we deserve that opportunity to continue to grow.
Anyone else? Well, at this point, we have an opportunity to, Helen had the motion on the table. And if we can go ahead and take a roll call on that specific motion.
Anderson,
Yes.
Baldwin.
Yes.
Dean,
Yes.
Gardner,
No.
Muncy,
No.
Stanton,
No.
White.
No.
Motion fails.
Okay. Thank you all. Now we're on to public comment on any item you would like to speak on.
Would you mind
anybody-
repeating
If
the,
anybody, hold on one second, please. I'm going to take people
would you
from the
just re-
room first. So if
would you
anybody,
mind repeating the results of the last vote?
oh, I apologize. That was, it failed by a vote of 4-3. Okay.
Thank you.
Anyone in the audience like to speak? And again, state your name and where you're from.
Renee Mulcrone. I own a house, 955 Holland Street.
Can you, I'm sorry, your first and last name again?
It's Renee Mulcrone, Mulcrone. I drew the short straw from the family to be here today.
I'm sorry.
We have a house that's in the R1 district. I just want to speak and say thank you. This is a difficult issue. We moved from the Ann Arbor area. Everybody's dealing with this. U of M fans like to go on their short-term rentals in Ann Arbor that are being debated down there. So I do want to say a couple things. We were the part of the family that didn't grow up here. I think it's sad that the population of Saugatuck actually declined during the last census. And I like to think of this as a family community. So we have mixed feelings. But I also want you to, the fact that you said that the rentals will be grandfathered in, I could have stayed back in Kalamazoo tonight, but that was, misinformation. It's good to know that that is going to be the case. I want to speak for the woman that spoke on Zoom as well. Our family can, we want to upkeep the house too. So not just rent it out to, to pay the taxes, but we want to upkeep it too. So we're a multi-generational family that wants to stay here, and, somebody's going to have to pick the short straw and live here. I mean, not that it's a bad thing to live here year-round, but I'm just joking. But anyway, so I just want to address too the issue of as this is going to mold into what you guys are going to decide. This 2-bedroom deal, we have big rooms in our house. So there are 2 people per bedroom, I wanted to say. So please consider that a little bit more closely. You said you have a small house, so cramming a bunch of people in is hard. It's just, I think that square footage could be used as a little bit of a measure there too. Anyway, thanks for your work. It's hard. And to those who think that this is a very divisive issue for Saugatuck, there's been divisive issues before, and Saugatuck has always come through. So
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Renee.
Anyone else in the audience wish to speak? Hi, Kathy.
Live at 334 Main Street. And there's a couple issues that have been going around for a long time. One of them is that there are no children and no families on the hill. And I disagree with that. I know there are families on the hill. There are easily 15 families on the hill. And there are also 15 families that have been on the hill for generations. We bought our house in the 80s. We raised our children. The hill was full of kids. So we are still there now, as is many of our residents and relatives and your relatives. And so to complain that there are no children on the hill to go to, all our kids went to Saugatuck. What would you like us to do? We're business owners, we're community members. So you want us to leave so that new young families can move into our homes? It just feels like we're being attacked as far as, yeah, you can't really stay there because we need families on the hill. Well, we've done that. We've done our job. So has other people on the hill. And the one woman who mentioned that she bought a house and is surrounded by renters, that's not exactly true. She knew exactly what she was getting into. There's a church on one side. Yes, there's a rental on the other, but there are family homes in the neighborhood. We rescued our own personal home, and we also bought the home next door to us that is a short-term rental, and it is a Singapore home that was brought up on the river, and it was a tear down. And we lifted up and put all our money in there, and it is our short-term rental. We use it mostly only in the summer. The rest of the time, our family comes and uses it, and our kids can't stay here. There are no jobs here. They have careers elsewhere, but they want to come and visit. They want to come and hang out with their friends. In the summertime, all those kids on the hill come back. And where do they stay? They stay at our house, or they stay at other short-term rentals that are owned by family members. We block it out just for those kids. So, and one other thing you mentioned, Holly, was grandfathered in. And I really would like to understand what that means. Not right now, because I know what it means in the historic district, but we're not in the historic district. So grandfathering in my short-term rental, what does that really mean? Does that mean it's only grandfathered for the life of me? You know, our properties will to our children. It's all in a trust. It's going to them. Will they have the grandfather in or not? That I don't know. You don't have to answer that now, but it is a question that a lot of people have.
Kathy, thank you.
And
I appreciate it. Your time's
okay.
up, my dear.
No,
Thank you
that's
so much.
Fine.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Kathy.
Okay, anyone else in the audience wish to speak? Okay, anyone online? I have Gary Medler in the top left. If you could unmute yourself.
Hi, Gary Medler, 461 Vine Street. I have three comments. The initial one is, under Michigan law, you have no inherent right to short-term rentals. The only reason you have a right to short-term rentals is because the city has granted either it as a permitted use or a special land use within your zoning district. Secondly, on this side of the river, we have 4 sections of Park Street that have, in the last few years, become investor, non-resident owner, short-term rentals. And so they are dead zones. And on this side of the river, in the woods and in the critical dunes, there are safety concerns. There's only 4 of us left who are on the line when the electric gets knocked out because the trees knock the lines out all the time. And in the last 4 years, we have put out 7 fires due to electrical wires down before service could be called. And 1 fire started on Vine Street, and I had to call the fire department to come put it out because it was spreading. So it becomes a safety factor when you have short-term rentals in such large sections, particularly on this side. The other comment I want to make, I think on short-term rentals, you really need to think about whether to eliminate short-term rentals in the districts over here. And if not, I think each of the zoning district registered taxpayers and owners would petition for their zoning district that permitted use be eliminated. On a different subject, the Village Square playground, the city cut down the historic Christmas tree. And they are on the fly reconfiguring what was approved by the Historic Commission and City Council, the Sinclair plan, because the consultant failed to adequately calculate the ADA requirements for placement of that equipment. A stop order should be imposed immediately to stop work so that the consultant can submit a new plan to the Historic Commission and then seek council approval of a new plan, because what they are doing is substantially different than what was approved. Thank you.
Right, Gary, thank you. Dick, if you could unmute yourself.
Dick Waskins, 6576 Heron Ridge Road. I want to thank everybody here on council for their very civilized discussion tonight. And probably you guys want to head over to the sandbar after you're done because it's been a late evening. But I do want to just a couple comments. One, first of all, I want to thank Holly. She actually sought me out during the time of the short-term rental task force process and wanted to have an honest discussion. And I believe she's very sincere. She really has her heart in this. I disagree with her, but I really appreciate her and I would enjoy talking to her at any point in time. The other thing I want to say in that, I don't know if you had a chance to see my letter to the editor that was in the commercial record today. I talked about our community as a whole. Sometimes when I see these meetings and hear the city of Saugatuck talk, it's like they're in a bubble and it's like, okay, they are the community, they are everything. There's nothing else around. It's the city of Saugatuck and that's that. We're a community of Saugatuck, Douglas, Saugatuck Township. Those lines aren't hard and fast. We cross them all the time. We all feel part of the same community. And I feel that when we look at short-term rentals and we talk about balance, that the balance actually is there. There are the families that are living and thriving in the township. There are opportunities for the families and stuff in Douglas as well. It just so happens that Saugatuck is a victim of its own success. They have been so popular as a resort town that that's where everybody who wants to go vacation and wants to spend time wants to be. So enjoy the fact that you've got that success and realize that we are a community and a community of families and a community of homes. These are the people who are going to your schools. These are the people who are going to your libraries. And I think you need to think a little outside of the box. It's not just the hill that is every community. It may be 30% on the hill, but it's not 30% out in the township. So as you think about this going forth and beyond this point in time, try to consider us as a community as a whole, because that's who I think we are. Thank you.
Dick, thank you so much. And I just want to take a moment. If we go past 10 o'clock, I need a motion to approve going past our 10 o'clock cutoff time. Our meetings are set for 3 hours. If we go beyond that, I'm going to need a motion. And so at this point, with this many people still on, we'll likely go past 10. So if I could have a motion to extend this until we finish with public comment.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I'll make a motion to extend the meeting time until the public comments have been completed.
Second.
Okay.
Second.
Logan White. Yeah. Okay. Is that a roll call or a voice vote?
Voice.
All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Okay, opposed? Motion carries. All right, moving on to Greg in the top left corner. Unmute yourself, please.
Yes, Greg Auer, 548 Hoffman Street. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to kind of address some comments that I heard around data, because I did submit, as I said in that document, at 5:58 or right before 6 p.m. I sent it to the clerk. I can prove through Experian data that, from in the town and 10 miles surrounding the town, you'll have a difficult time supporting the businesses and the restaurants that currently exist. This data is not analyzing somebody else's data. All I'm speaking to is, and all the point I want to make is, Stop looking at everybody else's data and have a data run or have a data model drawn against Saugatuck specifically. Because you're looking at Charlevoix, as you say, it's not like us, or you're looking at these other places, it's not like us. Great. You can do a data run. And if I'm somebody who doesn't work in data analytics, but I have access to data analytics people who work for me, and I can do this in 10 minutes, how could you not run a data run specifically on Saugatuck and track the detail that you need to make the decision on caps and moratoriums? That is my only plea, and it's the same plea I've made for weeks on end. And every time we've done this, again, happy to connect you with people to do these data runs on Saugatuck specifically and the potential impact of any decision made from here on out.
Greg, thank you.
Greg.
Brad, go ahead. If you could unmute yourself.
Hi there, Brad Va, 260 Brook Street, live over in Hamilton. First of all, I want to thank again everybody for everything that they did today. I very much appreciate that the moratorium did fail. I want to be very clear that I am totally open to the conversation around caps, around other things that could potentially happen to keep a balance between short-term rentals and good neighborhoods. Neighborhoods need neighbors, things like that. The thing that I'm a bit perturbed by that I wanted to kind of call out here in my closing comments actually ties into my opening comments. And it's really about the quote unquote TED Talk that Councilmember Anderson gave here, where Councilmember Anderson, who is also a member of the Planning Commission, is my understanding, said that a moratorium is a cap and spoke quite eloquently about how the moratorium is a means to an end, and that end is caps. That gives me a lot of pause and a lot of concern about how any additional process may move forward, because the Planning Commission is supposed to be an advisory council to the City Council. It is supposed to take data in, to do investigations, to do research, and provide council with recommendations. But given the statements of Ms. Anderson, given the statements of Mr. Manns, given the statements of Mr. Lachey, it's very clear through this conversation tonight that there are members of the Planning Commission that have an agenda, I believe was the exact word used, an agenda to push forth caps, regardless of any investigation or any kind of data that may be done. When Ms. Anderson said that a moratorium is a cap, but the moratorium was supposed to give the Planning Commission time to study caps, that seemed quite disingenuous and quite disconcerting from my perspective as to what role the Planning Commission is taking in pushing and driving policy in this council. So just wanted to put that on the record and have other people kind of ruminate on that. So
Thank you, Brad.
Thanks, Brad.
Joe Coelho. Unmute yourself, Joe.
Yep, sorry. Joe Kwan, 764 Mason Street. Just want to circle back to some comments made earlier about moving forward and kind of figuring out the cost after the fact. And I'm not sure about the rest of the people on the call, but there's very few, if anything, that I will figure out how much it costs after I have the thing. And so I would caution you all to, we should know what something is going to cost prior to even knowing if it's worth moving forward with it, not the other way around. The other concern is when I hear people talking about people who, the residents, the full-time residents versus the people who are, this is a second home or short-term rental or whatever. It sounds like if this goes to a vote, the people who shoulder the larger financial burden of higher taxes will not even get a vote in the future of the community. And so that's concerning to me. And then there was also a comment about the inspections going from 1 year or from 3 years to 1 year, and that might possibly shorten the inspection time, and that's how they would be able to make it through the increased number of inspections. And my experience with inspection is an inspection is an inspection. If you have 100 items that you have to inspect, you can't cut that just because you're doing it, once a year versus 3 years. So that was a little bit concerning to me as well. And lastly, been a lot of talk about what other cities are doing. I get a lot of these travel, top destinations, and Sagatuck from Michigan is always in the top. And these other communities that were mentioned, I mean, I've seen South Haven, but these other ones don't even show up in those top destination spots. And has already been said, we are a tourist community, and I believe if we want to stay at the top of that list, we just need to be careful about how we move forward. Thank you.
Joe, thank you. Richard, if you could unmute yourself, give us your first and last name, where you live.
Hi, my name is Richard Doherty, 828 Park Street. You hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yep. Kind of very much agreed with what Brad was saying. With the Planning and Zoning Commission, really did seem like there was quite a bit of bias on the Planning and Zoning Commission, as there's supposed to be more of a recommendations to City Council. So I did just want to point out, I do agree with what he was saying. Now, I was kind of concerned about how I'm sorry, I didn't get a chance to jump on earlier. In regards to I do agree with a lot of the recommendations put forth for noise ordinances and such. I just don't believe there's been much. It's kind of jumping forward without knowing fee structure and how that's all going to work, putting all this forward. There's no, 2 people per room. My property does not have the larger spaces, so wouldn't be, more than 2 people per room, but some places may. So I'm not sure why there's no regard for square footage. It's same thing with the how this all going to be enforced. I think we're kind of jumping a little forward before actually working all that out. I would have thought that would have been worked out prior to actually pushing forward with this. So just kind of wanted to voice some opinions. I haven't been able to say anything quite yet. I wish I would have gotten on before the vote, but just kind of want to get on record saying that I believe that there should have been a little bit more dialogue prior to the vote on how we move forward. Again, I'm all for getting some safety regulations and agree with a lot of what the task force did and thank them a lot. There was a lot of work, I know. I just think there should have been a little bit more work done, before actually moving forward with the vote.
All right, Richard, thank you. Sheila, if you could unmute yourself, please.
Yeah, thank you for your time. So glad to hear the vote, the way it went tonight.
I'm sorry, Sheila, if you could one more time state your first and last name and where you live.
Yes, Sheila Denman, 860 Simonson Drive. So glad to hear the way the vote went tonight. 2 of my concerns have to do with the ability to assign the license to a seller. So should we sell our house, being able to take that license for a rental to go to the next buyer. But also, we have a very large room in our basement that has multiple, it has window access, but it has 2 bunk beds in it. So it has the space for 4 kids. That is important for us in our rental. So the limit to 2 per bedroom is significant concern.
Okay, Sheila, thank you. Anyone else?
Thank
with their
you.
han- Yeah, anyone else with their hand up? Jamie, do you see anyone else?
I do.
Okay, and we'll close public comment at this time. We're on to council comments.
Your motion is the meeting after public comments.
Okay.
I don't know how you want to handle that, but that was.
Yes, you're,
Do we all feel in favor of having a motion to adjourn?
without council comments, I should have said after council comments for adjournment.
Well,
Yeah.
you could certainly
Yeah,
make
sorry,
a
that was
motion
my
to extend
mistake.
your meeting to have council comments if you'd like.
I will make a motion to extend the meeting for council comments and then adjournment.
Do I have a second? All those in favor say yes.
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 Opposed?
Thank you.
That's okay.
That's
All right.
Good call.
Yeah.
Good catch.
And I didn't say yes. Yes. Okay, so, all right.
Scott's got a shirt.
Um,
again. We might want to.
Oh, God.
Oh, Scott Sullivan, Scott Sullivan, if we could.
Can you turn?
Oh, golly.
Here we go.
Guy had his video on and he was
Okay.
shirtless.
Okay, council comments. Let's start with Holly.
I want to thank everybody. I thought we had a really good and productive and civil discussion. And again, it was nice to have the fury, down. And I really want to, thank the clerks and, everybody and our acting, city manager for the elections. It's really important. It reminds us why we're all here since we went through the process.
Okay,
So,
well, we got
thank you,
what we
Jamie.
need.
Okay, Russ, if you could go.
Yes, thank you. I'm grateful. I'm humbled by this community as well as the members of council, and I appreciate the dialogue this evening. And unfortunately, Renee left, but she mentioned her mother was Arlene Sherman. Some of you may know Arlene Sherman. She was a former mayor of the city of Saugatuck, and I served on council with Arlene. I would be very curious as to how Arlene would have reacted to this conversation. But anyway, it's just a good reminder that we have been through far more contentious issues in the city of Saugatuck.
Thanks, Russ. Helen?
Yeah, I do want to first thank our clerk and deputy clerk. The election, Holly and I both worked it and it went very smoothly. I want to thank our acting city manager. You're crushing it. I very much appreciate all your efforts. I can't say enough good things about it, and I haven't heard anything but wonderful things about it. So I'm very grateful for that. Grateful for what got passed tonight, disappointed by what didn't, but that's democracy. I'm totally cool with it. Look to fight another day alongside you folks, and I'll get my way next time.
Scott?
Once again, compliments to city staff for their endurance on nights like tonight. And a particular thanks to Jamie for a safe and secure election. I expect the November election will be very consequential, not only for the nation, but for Saugatuck.
All right, Gregory?
I just want to thank all my friends that have been on both sides of this issue and that we're still friends. I have friends that were for the moratorium and friends that were against having the moratorium. And I really appreciate the civil discussions that we have. We don't agree, but I'm glad that we're still friends and we'll probably meet up at the sandbar or something sometime soon. I'll tell you one thing I've really learned is that I've really learned this week and is that, I've
Moving the screen to the audience.
is it?
Okay, good job, Jamie.
I have a new respect for those serving. Now, this is, some of us are kind of new to it. This is our second year, right? And you've just started. But I've got to say, it's been a very long couple of weeks for me. And I'm looking very forward to putting my feet up tonight. If my boss is listening, or I'll probably be in late tomorrow.
Okay, Logan?
Just to thank you to the community for their being heard. That's a really important thing. And this conversation started a long time before this week, and I expect it will continue a long time after. It's very grateful for this. It's nice. Yeah, and a nice catch to Jamie on making the meeting work right. I would hate for all this to be overshadowed by us like prematurely or messing up the rules at the end here.
Exactly.
Not looking forward to the headlines tomorrow either way. And also a thank you to Gary Medler for your comment on my word choice. I appreciate your training in being pedantic. I feel comfortable teasing him a little bit on record. I know Gary. And words are important and you should use them correctly. I think we all understand the meaning of what was behind that, but I just appreciate that. Thank you for keeping me in line there, Gary.
And Jamie, thank you for keeping me in line on all the rules.
Yeah.
I appreciate that so much. I have nothing more to add. So if at this time we can have a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second?
Gardner Anderson.
Yep. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
All right.